This is to inform the general public that this meeting is being held in compliance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975. The notice for this meeting was emailed to the Star Ledger and the West Orange Chronicle and filed in the Township Clerk's office on March 18th, 2021. Councilwoman Castellino,
Present.
Councilwoman McCartney,
Present.
Councilman Rutherford,
Present.
Councilwoman Williams,
Present.
Council President Matute Brown,
Present.
Mayor Parisi.
Present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and thank you to everyone who is here and joining us for the mayor's presentation on Rock Spring. And without any further ado, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for giving us the time. And I know this has been a long time coming, but there's a lot of pieces to this that we're going to talk a little bit about. It's a long presentation, so I wish that hopefully everyone can bear with us, and we'll obviously spend as much time as the council would like us to answer questions and discuss afterwards. So I am going to share and obviously confirm that everyone can
Can
see
it.
this. Can
Yes.
everyone see that?
Yes,
We're good?
we're good.
Wonderful. Hopefully the public can as well. So again, thank you, Council President, for this opportunity to talk about Rock Spring. This has been a long time coming, and there's a few reasons for that. We're going to take you through the process, kind of take you through what we're thinking and where we think we go from here. And hopefully the council, we could address their questions, and hopefully the council, we can all come to some agreement on where we go. So I do want to just take one little sidestep here. This was given to me by David, a pretty neat little thing. This is the original architectural rendering of the course. It was, of all places, found in the maintenance shed at Rock Spring. This document we're looking at, as you can see, it's pretty badly torn and worn, but it's dates back 100 years to the club's original opening. So we didn't scrutinize the course layout, but this document speaks to the history of the course, again, opening originally in 1925. Just a little neat artifact that I thought we'd kind of show the public. Unfortunately, it's not in good enough shape to display somewhere, but still pretty cool. So just as a summary, move some of these things. So the course was originally purchased, again, after lengthy conversation. We closed on April 18th of 2019. The original purchase price was a little over $11 million. The property generated at the time property taxes just under $600,000. Part of the discussion and the mathematics that went into the decision was that we were going to forego those taxes. We knew that, but that is something that needs to be addressed overall. Beginning in 2022, we are going to have principal and interest payments that the Township Council will have to deal with in their budget process of roughly $550,000 to $850,000. I know it's a long vig, and John Gross can talk about that a little bit later on. That has to do with whether or not there's going to be short-term notes or long-term notes. The council can discuss that probably at a later date, maybe at the budget period. We can talk about that, but we are going to have principal and interest payments we have to address. I do want to acknowledge David Kronheim, who was part of the discussions with the township when we first purchased the course, when these conversations started a couple of years ago. He's been a wonderful asset to the community, and obviously with the council support, we connected with Kyle, our golf architect, who's been, again, a wonderful resource. Not only has he had some experience with Rock Spring specifically, but experience with golf courses all over the country, and their expertise and the supporting staff from the two of them has obviously been important to us in getting to this point tonight. And obviously the township professional staff as well, all the same people that the council deals with on an ongoing basis, Lenny and Jack and John Gross and the chief and Nick, who also, besides being OEM and dealing with the pandemic this past year, has been very helpful with the Rock Spring as well. And of course, Kemper Sports, we'll talk about them in a little bit. Several members from Kemper are here tonight. They've been a great partner with the community, really pleased with what they do. And they've obviously been very important to the process that we're talking about tonight. And obviously, we're here to talk about what we do with the property long-term. And clearly that has a lot to do with development. And I can tell you, we've heard and discussed this property a lot with the development community, both solicited and unsolicited. Once this kind of hit the news in 2019, ever since then, people have been reaching out with their thoughts and their interests. So we have not had any shortage of feedback about the property, and a lot of that helped us figure out what it is we're going to talk about tonight. Obviously, again, I talked about Kemper, just really wonderful at what they do, professional, been a pleasure to work with. And the course in the first 2 seasons has been a huge success despite some challenges. And what are those challenges? Well, obviously 2019, we didn't close until I mentioned earlier, April. So we didn't have the first rounds until May 10th. And yet in 2019, they still did over 22,000 rounds of golf in that first season that the township owned the course. And 2020, again, challenges mainly because of COVID, but yet they still did over 35, almost 36,000 rounds of golf, way more than a private club had done. And obviously we knew that a public course would do more than a private club did, but way more successful than I think, though we had been hopeful that the public would embrace the course. They clearly have. And the first 2 years have really shown the public's interest in the course. So right now, there's just under 14,000 golf customers in the database. And what's interesting about that is a little over 12,000, a huge majority of that number are actually repeat golf customers, meaning that people come, they like it, and they're coming back and coming back and coming back. If you look at the top 5 zip codes, no big surprise that West Orange would be the #1 zip code in terms of 20% of the users are from West Orange. That's really not a surprise for any public course, and Livingston nearby, and Montfield, Fairfield area close behind, and Hoboken, Jersey City. I think that's important to mention, as we've heard from Kemper over and over from the beginning, that this has been really embraced from that area of the state, which has a lot of people who are working in New York and have been finding opportunities to play in that area or even in New York. And they have really embraced Rock Spring and are coming back frequently, to the point where that zip code is the 4th highest among our regular users. And then again, another Essex County area, Hanover, Caldwell, all within close proximity to each other. They're both in at 6.8%. So the course has been well received by the public. And that was, again, though we were hopeful, it was a big question we had early on as to whether or not the public would embrace this as a public course. And clearly in these first 2 years, they have. So if you look at the revenues, and remember the arrangement we made with Kemper, the township was committed that there would not be any downside. We did not want to put the township at risk. It was enough of a challenge and enough of kind of a unique situation that we were to buy the course. We didn't want to be on the hook for the operation. So the arrangement we made with Kemper was township gets 5% of the gross. So we didn't want to hear if they had a bad year or if things weren't going well. We get 5% of the gross. So there was no downside. In that first year, 5% paid just a little over $85,000. Then the expenses come out, and then Kemper, depending on expenses, get their 5%. And then we would split anything in excess of that. And obviously in that first year, probably because we started so late. And if you remember also in 2019, not only did we start late, but if you recall, that May and June was really wet. So they lost, I can't tell you how many days of available golf simply because of the tremendous rain we had that year. So in the end, at the end of 2019, there was no profits, quote unquote, to split, but the town did get its 5% fee of a little over $85,000. And then in 2020, again, the rounds went way up. That meant the gross revenue went way up. So the 5% of that was a much bigger number to the township. And then if you look at, we'll talk about this in a second, but the expenses were way down. So 5% to Kemper was much higher. And then the township's 50% split became a huge number. So in 2020, we generated $540,000 in revenue from this course. But it's just important to kind of pause for a second and not get excited that we're going to be making $600,000-$700,000 every year on this. That is largely in part, if you look at the expenses went down even though the gross revenues went up. And that's clearly because of COVID. Because of COVID, they hired a lot less staff. There was not dining staff, so there was no food and beverage element. So the expenses were way down simply because they were running at contactless golf as much as possible. So there was much more to split. I don't think if 2020 produces the same gross revenue, it's unfortunately just not realistic to think that the expenses are going to continue to go down and there's going to be a lot more for us to split at the end of the year. So 2020, great year. Township's take from Rock Spring was $542,000. That's great. I just don't want people to think that that's going to be the normal take and the routine take into the future. A couple important improvements that needed for the course, certainly to preserve the course long-term and to guarantee long-term play. As you can appreciate, when you're doing this kind of numbers of rounds, it can beat up the course. So it's going to require some improvements, and a couple immediately that we have to talk about are the cart paths. And for those who might not play golf or might not be familiar with it, it's for a public course, it's important that cart paths are in good shape and connect from hole to hole to hole to hole. So on wet days, the cart path can still take someone around all 18 holes, but never drive on the grass. And the reason that that's important is because a lot of people who enjoy playing golf don't like to walk. So Kemper has explained from the beginning that because the cart paths aren't in good shape, when we have rainy days or even days after rainy days, and the course is set up where the carts can't go on the course and it's walking only, a lot of people come and leave. So with completing the cart paths and having all 18 holes connected, we anticipate with David and Kyle's help, as well as Kemper's input, that the course could probably do an extra 3 to 3.5 thousand rounds a year. That's significant revenue that we're leaving on the table, because when people get there, if the course is wet, they simply don't want to walk. Now that's a big investment. We anticipate roughly $770,000, but cart paths don't erode as quickly as roads do. So that is an investment that would last many, many years and be in good shape. But that is something that's important to consider. And the bunkers, we knew when we bought the course that the bunkers were in bad shape. Rock Spring had done some bunker repair over the last 15 years or so. Some of it was done well, some of it wasn't. Some of it, even that was done well, had eroded and is in really bad shape. And again, for golfers, that's an important element of the game. And we believe the bunker repairs that are needed total roughly $750,000. So we know those are big numbers, but they are important to the play and to the long-term success of the course. And we do believe that with a long-term operators agreement, up till now, we've only done short-term deals with Kemper. We believe that with a long-term deal, either by Kemper or anyone else who might be, I guess, ultimately interested in operating the course, that an operator would absorb those costs because it's clearly in their benefit as well to see these things done. So important dollars to consider, but we do believe that with a long-term operators agreement, it could be built into the agreement that an operator there for a number of years would absorb that cost. So let's go back to early 2019 when these conversations started. The township was clear from the beginning. So we tried in talking about this unique situation and not very common for government to buy golf courses. In fact, at the time, we were the only municipality in the state that was even contemplating buying a course when we knew that economically a lot of the golf courses were struggling. But we were upfront right from the beginning. In all the presentations we did, we said there would be some sort of development. We knew that the best way to prevent large-scale development would be to purchase the land, that Rock Spring could have sold the land to a developer, and certainly with the fair share housing requirements, that a developer could have got a lot of units. We wanted to preserve land. We wanted to preserve the 138 acres. We wanted to limit access off of Rock Spring Road. We always envisioned creating access off Northfield directly. And again, we wanted the idea of creating some recreational space, because we thought at the time, not really familiar with what the public golf market was going to be for a unique course like this. We kicked around the idea of turning it into a 9-hole golf course. And that freed up a lot of land for some other recreational uses. And the development that we always envisioned was going to be fronting Northfield Avenue. So these were the original commitments that the township had. It was upfront with the public, upfront with the council. These were the important things that we were talking about. And obviously, so where are we going? Where are we going now? Knowing that 2 years ago, these were our commitments. 2 years, the course has been hugely successful. So, where do we go now? Well, I've said it before in many other instances, and I think it's something the council and the township should be proud about, but buying Rock Spring was a bold move. It was the largest single bond in most of our years of experience in government. It was one of the few towns that have ever bought a private club to keep it a golf course. It was a bold move and something that the township should be proud of, but we have to figure out what the next step is. And the next step isn't about today or the next 2 years. Now that we bought the club, we've had a couple years to digest it. We have a couple years of experience in operating it as a golf course. we have to figure out now, what's the township going to do for the next 20 or 30 years if we're going to continue to operate a golf course? And what do we do that we allow the property to stay current in years to come? Owning a golf course is no different than our town pool or parks or anything else. You're going to have to continually invest in them and make improvements to them to keep it viable, to see that we are always attractive to the golfing community. Because if we can't continue to be attractive to the golfing community, then we're going to be, or future governments are going to be right back where we were in 2019, trying to figure out what to do with the property. So we need a long-term plan that's not only going to preserve it in the short time, but it's going to allow us to address the needs of the property and the use of the property for years to come. So let's, everything we do, whether it's the budget process, whether it's figuring out capital improvements, roads or parks, it's always trying to figure out what the township's goals. And as we all know, sometimes those are conflicting. Our objectives are conflicting. So is our interest in to increase the tax base or just preserve the tax base? We purchased the property to preserve the course, to preserve it as a golf course, but also to preserve as much as we could of the 138 acres. If our goal was to increase property taxes, we should have let just Rock Spring sell it to a developer and have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of units. But we wanted to preserve the history. We wanted to preserve the course. And we also wanted to provide an intangible value to the community. Clearly, having a public course owned by the township, part of that neighborhood, as part of the community, one that's become as successful and popular as it is, that's an intangible value to this entire community that's difficult to put a value on. Certainly when you look at the Walker Road neighborhood or the Upper Gregory neighborhood, this is in their backyard. Keeping it a golf course, that's a huge value. But again, if our interest was only to increase the tax base, then that's real simple. We can sell this and developers would build 12, 700, 800, 1,000 units. Again, remember, if you go back to the 2019 presentation, there were other towns dealing with the golf course developments, and because of their fair share housing responsibility, they were turning them into anywhere from 700 to 1,100 units. So it's not always about just increasing the tax base. It's a combination of things, and sometimes those things are competing objectives, but it's always trying to find a balance. It can't always be about saving tax dollars or raising revenue. Our job as elected officials is trying to strike a balance of very, sometimes equally important, but competing objectives. Obviously, we want to preserve the course, but it needs to be sustainable over the long term. And look, it's sometimes when you talk about tax revenue, everyone kind of cringes. Oh, we shouldn't just be trying to raise tax revenue because it never ends. The truth is, you're right, it never ends. But as we all know, whether we like it or not, our expenses go up. And in New Jersey, there's very few ways to raise revenue. We rely on the ability to collect property taxes, to pay salaries, pave roads, buy golf courses, do all the important things, educate our children, all very important. So we can't just exclude the objective of producing tax revenue as not important. The fact is, it's important to what we do. And if we don't find ways always to increase tax revenue, then the only ways to continue to pay for our increasing obligations is to raise taxes. And that's not supportive in the long run, but it's certainly not supportive to the course. We have to figure out a way that the course can not only do a large number of rounds, but can be sustainable for the town long after all of us are out of government and future governments are trying to figure out how to sustain this beautiful amenity that way back in 2019, the township bought for us. So whether we like that or not, there's an obligation to raise tax revenue. And again, from the very onset of these discussions, we talked about that important need. The problem is, what's changed from those early conversations, and why are we now 2 years later having a conversation we thought we were going to have 6 months later? And it's real simple. It's the popularity of the course, which is a really good problem. The public is eating up this course. There's huge demand. I drove by today and there were people all over the course in this beautiful weather we had today. And because of that, it's maintaining this course as an 18-hole golf course. Again, the early discussions, we were pretty clear, despite some people being critical of that we kind of envisioned turning it into a 9-hole course. And that wasn't unprecedented. There are very popular 9-hole golf courses here in Jersey alone, let alone nationally. But the demand and the success of the course has got us thinking differently. So how do you then generate revenue, set the course up long-term, meet as many of those original objectives as possible when you have a lot less land? There's a lot less options for space because we're going to keep it 18 holes. Kyle and David can talk more specifically later on, but 138 acres, that's small for 18 holes. So there's not a lot of leftover land. So how do you make all these components fit? It clearly limits the ability to find a public use, which we had always thought was an important part of the equation. That makes this very difficult. And obviously because of that, the building costs increase, mainly because we're now on a lot less footprint. We're going to keep 18 holes. So now any residential development, any development at all is going to require a parking deck. You don't have enough land to do surface parking. The original proposal and discussions we had, we envisioned developing a little piece of fronting Northfield Avenue, which had plenty of land on what was going to be 11, 12 acres. There was plenty of land to do some development and have surface parking. That gets eliminated when you're going to keep it 18 holes. And so again, how do we approach this? And we think that a really good tool to get us where we need to get is what's called an area in need of rehabilitation. Rehabilitation simply means an undertaking by means extensive repair, reconstruction, or renovation of existing structures with or without the introduction of new construction or the enlargement of existing structures in any area that has been determined to be in need of rehabilitation or redevelopment to eliminate substandard structural or housing conditions and arrest the deterioration of that area. That's the statute. That's what it reads. So what does it mean? Just so everyone, we're crystal clear, because I can imagine all the people are freaking out. This is not a redevelopment zone. It's a very clear distinction with the law. It does not allow for a pilot. This is not a long-term tax abatement. In fact, the statute specifically precludes a pilot or long-term tax abatement. It's simply a zoning overlay that provides a township discretion in how we handle some of these issues, not only on this property, but in properties going forward. And we actually recommend, and we're going to talk about that now, we recommend that we create this area in need of rehabilitation town-wide, because within the statute, there are benefits, tax benefits to all residents in township that would look to perform renovations on their community, on their homes, which is always important for our township. As we all know, nothing speaks higher of a community than one that can attract investment. And that doesn't only mean people coming into the township. Councilwoman Williams is a realtor. She sees every day the investment people are making in this community. We like that, but it's also important that we see existing property owners invest in their property. And this area in need rehabilitation provides a mechanism for them to benefit from that. And so what qualifies? Why does our town qualify? So a significant portion of structures are deteriorated or substandard. That's not necessarily West Orange, but that's just one of the conditions. More than half of the housing stock is delineated at least 50 years old. That West Orange certainly fits. An overwhelming amount of our housing stock is significantly older than 50 years. There's a pattern of vacancy, abandonment, underutilization. That's not necessarily one that fits. Or there's a persistent arrearage of property taxes. This year, there's some problems with collection because of COVID, but generally speaking, not an issue here either. Environmental contamination, again, not necessarily an issue all over town, but there are some areas. And of course, the bigger one, in addition to the housing stock of at least 50 years, it's a majority of the water and sewer infrastructure in the area is at least 50 years old. And again, that's clearly West Orange, as most of the system in town is way in excess of 50 years old. So we do believe that the township as a whole fits the statutory definition of an area in need of rehabilitation. So how does that help us, or how does it, more importantly, to start the conversation, how does it help our property taxpayers? So what it basically says, in the interest of encouraging investment in our homes, is that it assumes that the first $25,000 of added assessment would be waived. People would waive that for 5 years. So that means if anyone is to do a renovation to their home town-wide, and that increases the assessed value, they don't pay taxes on the first $25,000 in assessed value for 5 years. And as we all know, and we've all heard it, I bought a house, I did a bunch of renovations, and oh my God, my taxes went up. That's an unfortunate reality in New Jersey because of the difficult system we have here in the state, that property taxes are a simple formula based on assessed value. So that often discourages property owners from making the big investment. Sometimes they'd rather just go to another community. In this case, they get an exemption on the first $25,000 of added assessment they do from any renovation. They simply don't have to pay that added assessment for 5 years. So what does that mean? That means if a property, just as an example, is assessed at $400,000 and they perform renovations that increases the assessed value to $420,000, rather than paying the increased taxes on that $20,000, because it's less than $25,000, they don't pay any added taxes for a full 5 years. So they get the benefit of those renovations. They get the benefit of the added assessment for 5 years without paying any additional taxes, hopefully encouraging residents to redo the bathroom, remodel the basement, remodel the kitchen, build the pool, do all the work that we want to see people do, and they don't get hit with increased property taxes because it's increasing the assessment. The second example is the same property owner that might be worth $400,000 in assessed value, and they do a really big project, a $50,000 project, one that raises the assessed value to $50,000. They don't pay the increased taxes on the first 25. So rather than significantly increasing their taxes based on a $50,000 added assessment, they only pay on the $25,000 for the first 5 years. So again, it increases that and increases the interest that people might have in investing in their houses, all because it's an area in need of rehabilitation designation. So there's also commercial and investment property benefits as well. So under a commercial or investment property, it's a little bit different. There are 3 options that the owner can choose, the township can choose. They can simply only pay 2% of the cost of the project for 5 years, as opposed to paying the increased taxes. They can pay 15% of gross revenue. So if it's an income producing business or property, they can choose to only pay the gross revenues. Or the option 3, it's a phase in, meaning if someone is significantly invest in a property and it significantly increases the assessed value, they don't have to pay the increase in assessed value all up front. It would simply be a phase in, 20% in year 2, no increase at all in phase year 1, 60% year in 4, 8 and 5, and then again, full assessment in year 6. So it encourages development and improvement in existing properties because they're not going to get a huge tax increase. So this is not a pilot that is not actual property tax calculation. This is an actual calculation of the taxes. It simply phases it in, and this applies to property owners as well as commercial and investment property owners as well. So we see this as a good tool because of what we're asking of this project. It's not a pilot, but it allows a phase-in of taxes on a property that we're not collecting any taxes. But it allows us to absorb a lot of the costs associated with this project that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But in this case, it benefits every taxpayer in town. And this is not a new concept. These are the towns right here already have area in need of rehabilitation townwide. So these towns, Belleville, Bloomfield, Bloomingdale, Dover, Elmwood Park, Highbridge, Hillside, Metuchen, Newark, Passaic, South Orange, West New York, Westfield, Woodbridge, they already have this in place where they're encouraging their residents to invest in the community and not get whacked with the taxes the first year. And it's encouraging commercial property owners, investment property owners to invest in their property and not have the increased property taxes as the discouragement for seeing that. So we think it's a good tool that not only benefits this property as we continue this conversation, but we think it's a huge benefit to all the residents of this community to encourage them, especially in this crazy market, to encourage them to invest in their property and not have the increased property taxes as the reason why they choose not to. Not a very difficult process, simply begins with our township engineer. We don't have to hire anybody. He would simply do a report confirming the conditions. And clearly we all know without a report from Lenny that the housing stock is mostly more than 50 years old and that the sewer system is clearly more than 50 years old. The township council then simply refers it to the planning board. They do a review in conjunction with our planner, and then the council could adopt a resolution. So not a real cost. It's simply a benefit to the community, to all the residents, not only this project. And again, it can't be any more clear. I know the discussions that surround some of these issues. This is not a long-term tax abatement. It's not a pilot. The statute specifically prohibits both of those. This is simply a mechanism that encourages investment in properties, not only properties owned by the township, but properties owned by all the neighbors and citizens that we work for every day. So let's get back to the project and see how this fits in. So whatever we do, we gotta clearly define what our realistic goals for the project. What are our expectations? Obviously, we want to maintain the course as 18 holes. We want to protect the quality of the course. It's a historic course. It has a lot of quality to it. One of the reasons I think golfers are liking it. We said that we wanted access off of Northfield Avenue directly. Now, I do want to emphasize we committed to closing off Rock Spring Road access. That doesn't necessarily, by closing that off, doesn't increase traffic on Northfield by having traffic on Northfield directly, because Rock Spring empties onto Northfield Avenue. So I don't think that by eliminating access from Rock Spring Road necessarily is going to increase traffic on Northfield, because it's coming off to Northfield anyway. This is simply going to preserve a little quality of life to that Rock Spring neighborhood that was, an important part of these discussions in 2019. And obviously, something that was always an important part of this and is important now is, again, permanent property preservation. That was always the goal. And in this case, a lot of it, because we're looking at a much smaller area to even consider developing on it. And of course, we got to replace the lost property tax revenue. That was always an important part of the goal. But I think bigger than that, again, not 2 or 3 years from now, thinking long-term, this is an opportunity to create a really special community on a golf course, on a really well-respected and beautiful golf course with beautiful views. We can create something really special, for the next 30 years, not just in the short term. So let's look at the course. This is the 138 acres of Rock Spring. Just as assuming people can see my cursor, this is holes 4 and 5 on the other side of Walker, and up here is Northfield Avenue. So let's talk now specifically of where we're going to focus our attention, and we're focusing our attention on this side of the property. Again, I marked Northfield Avenue up here. Currently, Northfield runs parallel to what is hole 17. West Road runs parallel to hole 18. For those quickly looking for bearings, Rock Spring Road is right off of here as you enter the parking lot, and this is the current clubhouse. Tennis courts are here. They're outdated, haven't been used or improved in a long time. And this whole area here is what's the old driving range. And if you remember the early discussions, we thought about that might be some sort of place to build a recreational center, or we saw that as land that could be used in some capacity. So you go to the next area, and this is, after all these years of discussion, working with David and Kyle and other professionals, getting a lot of input, this area in gray is the area that we see we could use to address the needs of this area. Some of the holes would be renumbered, and that's not necessarily a product of this plan. We believe that we're going to renumber the holes anyway. It makes a better flow of play, and also maybe even accommodates the person interested in playing only 9 holes. The 9 hole would get them back to the clubhouse. So there's some reason why we think numbering them would be better anyway. So in this particular case, what is currently hole 17 would become 9. By utilizing this gray area, which is mostly hole 18, we have to move 18 over into what was that large area that was the old driving range. We have to rework some tees and greens. 17th would be shortened a little bit. 18th, again, move slightly and shortened a little bit. But we would look to this gray area to accommodate our objectives. So how does that look like in the end? Well, first, it's the roadway. It's building a roadway that comes off of Northfield Avenue to access the course. Now, keep in mind, this is not exactly where it's going to go, but we see the roadway coming up here. It would require a lot of work on the intersection. There's a lot of engineering. There's some grade changes. So there's some retaining walls and topography issues that have to be dealt with. In the end, that road is about 1,250 feet long. That's a long road. That's a fifth of a mile, a little over a fifth of a mile. But again, it would eliminate access to the property off of Rock Spring Road, which was something that we committed early on to that neighborhood. And we can fulfill that by doing this road. It does not shut down Rock Spring Road. We're not going to build a wall there, but it will be gated. We would always want access for an emergency for them to be, for the township, or God forbid there's a serious issue there, that we could access it from an emergency. But there would be no longer access of this property through Rock Spring Road because of the road. Secondly, what's next? It's looking at this gray area here, the tennis courts, the lower parking lot where 18 used to be. And that's the area where we would build a new clubhouse, a new parking area. You see here, we have a chipping green and and a practice green and an area for a cart shed to be there as well. That's an operational issue. Right now, the carts are not kept near the clubhouse, so that becomes an operational issue. So having a cart shed near the cart path, near the clubhouse would be beneficial. So this gray area here off the road would be where we would situate a new clubhouse and parking. And then the next phase up here, this is what we recommend as developing. It is a significantly less size of the property. Originally, again, when kicking around the idea that we would convert the course to 9 holes, we were looking at a lot of area fronting Northfield Avenue as the proposed development area. It was anywhere from 12 to 15 acres. Obviously, that's not an option when we're keeping it 18. So we're reducing it to 6.5 acres for some residential development. And obviously, again, because it's a lot less land, it requires a parking deck. Again, there'd be no access off of Rock Spring Road. All access for golfers and anyone who were to live here would be off of the Northfield Avenue new road that we built with the intersection, the lighted intersection at Ridgeway Avenue. And again, in any development in town, there's an obligation we have as part of our Fair Share Housing Approved Plan to accommodate affordable housing. So again, now just step back for a second and look at what is the developable area. That means now let's look at this part of the property. The original slide we looked at a few minutes ago, the 138 acres, and we'd be ready for our Green Acres application, where we were originally thinking we would try to preserve maybe 125 acres. With this, we can preserve more than 130 acres of the whole site, 95% of the property. We do have some things that would have to be met, even if everyone agreed with this and we move forward. There's some issues that have to be met to meet the burdens of the Green Acre application. So the actual application might not be for 2 years, which is their next funding. But we do believe this makes a better application. We're going to be able to get 50% of the market value. Again, Green Acres works on assessed value, appraised value rather, not purchase price. We had always felt that we were buying an asset that would appraise significantly higher than we paid for. So we believe we can get a lot of money back from Green Acres, and they would see it as the win that we would see, that this would preserve more than 130 acres of this site forever, meaning that even if future governments found that they just couldn't operate it as a golf course anymore, other than becoming recreational parkland, that's all that would happen on this property. And I think that was always a big goal, and one that with this plan, we can accommodate that and meet some of our other obligations. So look, are we able to meet the expectations? Yeah, we think we can check off a lot of boxes with this. We can keep it 18 holes. We can keep it a par 71, which to golfers, that's important. We've shortened a couple holes, but it doesn't change that it would still be a par 71, makes the holes, maybe the 2 holes a little bit unique and interesting, but still par 71, doesn't ruin the integrity of the course. There's a lot of neat features of this golf course. And other than with these 2 holes that were developed, a little bit late anyway, it doesn't really jeopardize the integrity or the historic nature of the course. And obviously it would prevent large scale development, but making the property sustainable. Again, if our goal is tax revenue, then having 1,100 homes built on this property, that's a lot of tax revenue, but that's not really what our objective was. And it allows us to preserve 95% of the property. And again, preserve it forever, regardless of what future governments may decide about golf. The land would be preserved forever. And it does protect the land fronting Walker Road. I'll tell you, and I'll talk more about this in a bit, a lot of developers that we spoke with, they all looked at holes 4 and 5, the area fronting Walker Road, as an area that maybe should be developed. The property is bigger than just 2 holes, so you could accommodate more over there. It was a residential neighborhood, access off the main road. That was an area that a lot of developers saw as an area that should be developed. But from the onset of our discussions, going back 2 years, we committed to that neighborhood. We committed to the Gregory neighborhood that we would not develop in that area. We would get access off those roads and put them on the county road and protect the land in those areas. And again, we would create the access from Northfield Avenue. The new clubhouse would serve golf needs, but also public dining. I know that's been important, and we'll mention that a little bit later too, that we wanted a public dining component in that in the clubhouse. And this would give us the ability to have a nice amenity for the community long term, not only for public dining, but public events or rental events, and provides a lot of opportunities, again, for the public today and into the future. And again, we'd shut down access from Rock Spring Road. The only access that would be at the end of Rock Spring Road would only be in the event of emergency. So it'd be gated off, and that community would really not have the traffic at all, other than the people that live on West Rainer or Rock Spring Road. It replaces and actually adds tax revenue. That was, again, clear what we mentioned 2 years ago from the onset, that there had to be a way to replace the revenue that we were losing. And though this is all still speculative as we kind of go through this, we think this plan would produce $1.75 to $1.9 million annually in property taxes. That would help not only the community, obviously, but allow the property to be sustainable long into the future. So, where do we get these ideas? Where do we talk? And I mentioned a couple of times, there's been no shortage of input from the development community. From the first time this hit the newspapers and hit online 2 years ago, developers have called frequently, people have reached out frequently, and everyone wanted to kind of explain what they thought was a great vision and that they can do it. So we had people we purposely reached out to, and tons of unsolicited response. A lot of people, I'll tell you, and it's the same old discussion, they requested pilots. That wasn't something we were interested in. I mentioned a lot of them saw holes 4 and 5 off of Walker. It's flat, it's big, it's in a residential neighborhood. A lot of them saw that is an area that we should consider for development. We said that it was not something we were interested in. A lot of them wanted to build fronting Northfield Avenue, which makes sense if we're going to a 9-hole golf course, but keeping it 18 doesn't make sense. And I'll even tell you, we had a supermarket that offered a lot of money for 15 acres fronting Northfield Avenue to build a supermarket there. Now, obviously, I guess the township, could always say needs another supermarket, but that wasn't something that we envisioned as beneficial to the area or to the township. And a lot of them just required large sections of land, which was something that we've been trying to figure out how we meet these goals, but protect as much as the land as possible. So we've been looking for the right partner and someone who was the right fit for this overall vision. And after a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, we believe that Avalon Bay Communities is the partner that we'd like to consider further exploring with the Township Council's input and support. And I know the stigma that's often attached with development and developers, but Avalon Bay is a public company. They're public since 1993. They're based out of Arlington, Virginia. They do have a New Jersey location. They're based out of Westfield, currently working in 12 states as well as Washington, D.C. They're a public company traded at $33 billion. This is not someone that's a friend of a friend. This is a real company. They've reached out to the town on other projects in the past and nothing ever kind of materialized, but they share our vision, and because they are as well seated as they are in the market, they can fund this project themselves. So they self-finance projects. And they build and operate projects, which is something that was important to the township as we've been talking to people. We didn't want someone to develop it and that was going to flip it. We wanted someone who saw the value in a potential project and was going to be part of it from the beginning to the end. And they don't sell projects. They operate them. They still operate projects they built in Jersey going back to the 80s. So that was important. That's a long-term commitment that would hopefully survive even any of us in local government, that they would still be with this project decades from now. They don't make political contributions. I know that's always a stigma that's associated with developers. It's a public company. They stand on their merits. They don't make contributions. I can tell you, for all you scribbling real fast at home, you can check. I've never taken any contributions from them, never asked, and they don't make them. They don't make them anywhere in the nation. They do have current projects being built in Old Bridge and Somerville, and all these towns here listed are past projects they've done in Jersey, and again, projects they still own. So they don't build and flip. They build and operate, long term. And we think that's important because not only do they share with us the vision of the property, they understand what our expectations and our obligations and what our interest was in preserving the property but making a sustainable project, and they're going to be in it long term. And we believe they're a great partner for what we're talking about. So what would be the obligations? Talked about a lot of things so far. So we know that we can make something work on that 6.5 acres. I know we'd all love it to be less. I don't think that's realistic. We really narrowed this down as tight as possible, keeping land open for a good successful 18-hole golf course, a new clubhouse. We think the purchase price, obviously it'd have to be negotiated, but we think that 6.5 acres, probably about $2 million. But here's what's important. I talked about a lot of things that would have to happen to even get to this point. We made it clear that Avalon Bay would have to fund the new traffic light. That new traffic light in that intersection at Northfield and Ridgeway Avenue, that's about a $500,000 cost. There's some topography issues, retaining wall issues. There's actually the traffic light, which we all know traffic lights themselves are expensive. That's a project Avalon Bay is gonna absorb. That road, 1,250 feet. I mentioned a fifth of a mile, roughly. It's probably even more than that. My math isn't great, but that's a long road at roughly $1.5 million. Avalon Bay is going to absorb that cost. We're not paying for that. You know, we can't expect them to build us a new clubhouse and parking. We did working with them. They'll build a site-ready construction pad for the clubhouse, for the parking. All the utilities will be run. It'll be ready for just to start construction to go up with the new clubhouse. So they'll do all the site work, all the engineering, all the grading, and all the utility work. That's about a $300,000 contribution, you know, to the site. That really makes it easy for us to go right up with the clubhouse. We don't have an exact number, but it would not exceed 300 residential units. There is a 15% affordable housing set aside, and they're gonna fully fund the affordables. And I know Councilman Rutherford and Councilwoman Williams, you weren't here, you know, but some of the really great projects going on Central Avenue is fulfilling an important affordable need. The township contributed to that. We recognize the importance of having the affordable units, and we made a big contribution to that. In this case, Avalon Bay is going to fully fund and meet the full obligation we have for affordable units within the complex. And here's a big one. I mentioned it earlier. The construction deck, you know, that is a big change from what we talked about several years ago when exploring the idea of buying this property. When we thought it could be surface parking, now you have to build a deck, and anyone will tell you decks are expensive. It's roughly $20,000 per parking space that, again, the developer's going to have to fully fund to support this project. And again, the township will not provide funding assistance on these issues. The developer working with Avalon Bay and coming up with a plan, they're prepared to absorb these costs, and they're real costs. And again, we think, in all the guys and people that we've spoken to, that they recognize and share what our vision for the property and understand what have been some of our concerns since the onset. But there are township responsibilities. That's unavoidable. And truth is, this new clubhouse, obviously a new clubhouse is expensive. But the truth is, if you've been to the clubhouse, and it's kind of quaint in its historic sense, but you know, it needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of money too. So we shouldn't look at a new clubhouse as being $4.8 to $5 million as $4.8 to $5 million. If we were to not do anything, whether it was now or in the short term, the existing clubhouse needs a lot of renovations that would probably be close to $1.5, $2 million anyway, to again put it in a position where we can have outings, where we can have public dining, where we can have public banquets, and make it a revenue source. So there's going to be a comparison of cost anyway, but moving the clubhouse, having a cart barn, again, helping in operations, and again, what we think is an interesting component in some of the early designs that we've been kicking around with the help of Kyle and his team, additional outdoor dining, you know, locations for the public. So we think we can make a really neat public space, not only to serve golf, but to serve the community. And again, I mentioned earlier that you'd have to make some changes to hole 18, a little bit to what's currently 17 rather. And so there are some changes to the golf course that might cost in the $700,000 area. Again, you have to know going in, we were going to have obligations to the golf course anyway. So we do think that some of this is upfront, but I certainly don't think any of us were naive enough to think that if we buy 138 acres of a working golf course, we weren't going to have obligations in the future to make improvements to the course, or even just to do significant maintenance issues as well. So what are the next steps? The next steps is obviously, after digesting a lot of this, is we would have to have more of a discussion publicly and amongst the council and the public with the idea of an area in need of rehabilitation. I believe it's a great benefit to the community, not just in helping put this project together, but for all of us who've entertained or actually done renovations to our homes, having the taxes waived for the first 5 years on the added assessment, that's a huge incentive to keep people here and make the investment here rather than just taking advantage of the market and bailing. We'd obviously want to have conversations and hear more from Avalon Bay and what they would do, and what we believe, hopefully share with the council why the administration believes they're the right partner for this project. And obviously we'd have to engineer an exact subdivision. I did a gray area of that 6.5 acres. That's certainly not done exactly. So we would need an actual subdivision of that developable land so we can move forward with the concept. But also, even though it's probably a year or two away, but to start preparing the Green Acres application. And then again, that subdivision would always be presented to council. And we have to work with the planner professionals and council members and public to actually develop the plan a little bit more fine-tuned than we did to get us to this point. And ultimately all that stuff, even though it's town-owned land and the council has a lot of discretion to approve plans, some of that would have to go to planning board for approval as well. So just let's think about the project and what we've talked about tonight and the summary of all this. So we knew, and again, the administration tried to be as clear as possible that buying the club was just the first step. We did not envision that we were just going to, buy a club and operate it forever. We had no idea if it would be popular. We had no idea where we needed to spend money or how we can recoup some of the property taxes. Public discussion, as I mentioned, it always included some development. We were always in the 175 to 200 number of units. So we're going a little bit in excess of that now. And that's mainly because the costs of the project have increased. We're asking the developer to absorb a lot of costs that when a small development fronting Northfield was envisioned, it didn't involve those costs. And of course, the reason we're changing the direction of the plan is because of the success of the course. And that's a great thing. As we've seen, people are coming from far and they're coming over and over again to play Rock Spring. That's something that I think, if we dare say, I think justifies the tough decision the council made to purchase the course in the beginning. But now's the time to set the property up for continued success for decades. What are we going to do on this property that's going to bring this property into the future? Again, something that long survives all of our involvement in government, but also provides property tax revenue. We can't ignore the fact that we need to generate revenue. We knew that again going in, that we had to figure out a way to generate revenue, not just the fees from golf. And again, important part again of the discussions. So no future council and future administration could ever be tempted to sell this land for the quick buck. Finalizing this concept would put us in a position to preserve 95% of the property forever. And an area in need of rehabilitation encourages in property investment townwide. This is a really neat mechanism the state of New Jersey came up with that encourages people to stay where they're at, invest in their properties, and not look to the increase in taxes as a reason why they don't do that. And clearly a bunch of towns statewide are already taking advantage of this. And again, it benefits all property owners. So this plan checks off a lot of the boxes. It meets a lot of our goals and a lot of our collective expectations going back to the original conversations 2 years ago. And real quick though, I was hoping it'd be finalized by tonight. The clubhouse will be open for public dining this year. We're real close to working that out. Kemper's real close to finalizing that. So though there'll still be COVID restrictions based on whatever the guidelines are, but the clubhouse will be open for public dining. We're real excited about that as well. So a lot of information, Council President. As always, I appreciate the time, and we're here for questions.
Mr. Mayor, is it possible that Mr. Kronheim and Mr. Franz, the architect, could give a couple of quick comments?
With Council President's approval, I think that'd be a great idea.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure. Happy to. I think I just would echo what the mayor said. I mean, the reason for the change in the plan has just been the tremendous success of the property. We had a great idea that we had a thought that this would be popular with people. It's a historic golf course. It's one, there are very few Seth Rayner golf courses that are available for the public to play. But to be honest, I think the response isn't just a success, it's overwhelming. I mean, that amount of rounds, to do almost 36,000 rounds last year. Let's not forget that golf in New Jersey was shut down for a month. And when it did come back, we only had twosomes for a while. So those numbers are actually artificially depressed a little bit, just due to the restrictions that were put in place. So as we look towards the future, I think the golf course is on an incredibly solid footing. Rich has told me not to say that buying Rock Spring was one of the best things that the township ever did, because you guys have done a lot of wonderful things, but certainly from a business standpoint, Kemper as an operator has been a tremendous partner to the township, and I do want to acknowledge their efforts as well. They're there day in, day out. Chris has been absolutely wonderful, and I think that the future is quite bright. And so again, we're in a great place, in part not only because the golf course has been popular, but also because it's been such a financial success. And pairing that revenue stream with the increased tax revenue that the mayor mentioned really puts the golf course on a trajectory that's very positive for the long term.
Could you introduce Dave, Kyle?
Yeah, let me take a moment. I've had the pleasure of meeting most of you who are here on the council, except for those of you who are new. But let me introduce Kyle Franz, who's our golf course architect. Kyle has a particular area of expertise in the restoration of classic golf courses, and I'll paraphrase his resume. If I leave anything out, he'll be sure to tell me. But Kyle has done a tremendous job with several very high-profile classic golf courses, including a Seth Rayner golf course down at the Country Club of Charleston that just hosted a U.S. Women's Open, which was, I think it was either there or at Mid Pines, where Kyle's work was recognized as the renovation of the year. So we're very fortunate to have in Kyle and in Jeff, his associate, who's with us tonight as well, some of the absolute most talented architects in the game, and people who will, I think, share our vision for where the golf course is going, and be the people who are actually implementing some of the changes that are proposed. Just a great team. We're very fortunate to have them.
Thanks, David. Fantastic presentation, Mayor. Hitting everything across the board. But where this property strikes most firmly for me is in the gut. This is a wonderful and special property. The golf course was designed by one of the great architects in history that would rank right up with Olmsted in terms of the great landscape architects. Really left a powerful imprint on our industry, and I've been very fortunate to work on the Country Club of Charleston. We just had the Women's Open, and I think it's a tremendous, wonderful opportunity for the city to have gotten a hold of this property just to begin with. The public only gets an opportunity to see so few of these great classic courses. It's really one of the great properties around the country in the public market. There's only one golf course that was designed by this particular architect, Seth Rayner, again, one of the great classic architects of all time, and there's just so few of these around the country. So could not be any more excited with the plan we put together, and the fact that it really preserves for potentially forever this wonderful asset for the public and just for the neighborhood itself. And I think it's great, Mayor, that you started with the history. The original plan for this property by this legendary architect. As it turns out, the some of the work that we would need to do on the property, just nudging over the 18th hole, is actually where the original architects originally intended. Seth Rayner and then Charles Banks, his understudy, that really took this project forward in the 1920s. They designed it pretty much exactly where we're going to put it, or would hopefully put it. So really just a great project across the board. And it's really exciting to see that the public has embraced the quality of this property, because again, it's something that we only get so few opportunities to see around the country.
Council President, just one last, I know Ben Blake's on it. He's appeared before the council in the past. He's the vice president and was one of the initial people who the mayor and I met with, and Mr. Blake or Mr. Parker, general manager of the year, is also on the call. So I don't know if Kemper wants to give any.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Trent, but before we move on from Mr. Franz, only because I want my council colleagues as well as the public to have the benefit to understand what you do, Mr. Franz. I did Google you, obviously, so I have some background, and I was very pleased to see that you were doing the site analysis for this. I am not in any way, shape, or form even familiar with golf, because I'm not a player, but I read a lot of the work that you've done. So can you just give the public and the council an overview of what it is that you do?
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
So, I've been very fortunate to work in the golf course design business for 20 years, and very fortunate to have worked on some of the very best golf courses built in the last 80 years. As a part of 2 projects that are in the 2 or 3 highest rated golf courses built in the last 80 years, in the top 100 rankings. And but for me, really where my passion is this kind of architecture, restoration architecture, where we come in and put the polish the apple, so to speak. We restore the great elements of these original properties. The original architects of this, again, Seth Rayner, and then it was handed off to Charles Banks, his understudy. They built some of the very best golf courses in the world. National Golf Links of America out on Long Island is among the first rank of greatest courses ever built, and many of the people in the highest levels of architectural aficionados really gets the very best golf course. And so for me, the allure of working on these properties is we can come in and see the things that have changed over 100 years, trees being planted or things that have just drifted away from the original architectural vision, and we can bring that original shine and detailing back out in them. So I was very fortunate to work on the restoration of Pinehurst number 2 here in Pinehurst, North Carolina, about 10 or so years ago, working for Bill Core and Ben Crenshaw. To do this restoration of this really great classic course by arguably the greatest architect of all time, and a very big change that occurred for one of the great courses, and right before the 2014 U.S. Men's and Women's Open. So a very big project for a very big event. And from there, I've gone on to work on restorations here in Pinehurst, and then all over the country. For my own company, the Mid Pines project that David had alluded to, the one renovation of the year 2013, and of course the Rayner course down in Charleston, Country Club Charleston, that had the U.S. Women's Open in 2019. Next year we'll also have the Women's Open here at Pine Needles in Pinehurst. It'll be the 4th time we've had it after a large renovation we've done the last 4 years, and we've been completing actually out in the field the last few years. But overall, I work at a dozen clubs around the country, working on this kind of thing, really taking a special old property like this and really trying to present it in the best light that we possibly can for the public and the golfers to see and really enjoy it. The thing that I would leave for both the golfing public and for those of you that might be new to great classical architecture, it's the same as classic Hollywood with Citizen Kane or Casablanca, or Olmsted again with landscape architecture, the Beatles. Great art is timeless, and these great architects from the 1920s did amazing work, and we're still studying and learning from it today. And as in this particular case, Charles Banks and Seth Rayner, they also built some of the most unique and the wildest and most interesting of all architecture. So it's really exciting stuff for golfers and just the public to get and enjoy the property alike. Many of the things we have talked about with the clubhouse would give the visitor, whether they're a golfer or not, a wonderful opportunity just to enjoy Cable Lake, enjoy the beautiful property, and just experience all the great things about this particular golf course. So a great amenity for everyone across the board, and just couldn't be more excited that this is something that could potentially preserve this property forever, and for golfers unborn, junior golfers that are going to enjoy this property for forever going forwards.
Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to share what I had read about you and your company, so I certainly appreciate that. I think we were going to Ben Blake. Mr. Blake, how are you?
Yes, thanks. I'll keep my remarks brief. We've got I'm sure a long way to go. Look, I just have to smile. We all sort of remember 2 years ago when we were walking out of the golf course and sort of saying, okay, we're going to take this on. It's been a wonderful ride so far, and our obligation, once the golf course is redesigned and all the things, is of course to have it in great condition. Today's golfers are very sophisticated and have the expectation of not only this wonderful design and unique facility, but it also needs to be in great shape, and we need to operate in such a way, as the mayor said, we're in the repeat customer business. So It's all about having great conditions on a consistent basis day to day, bringing people back day to day, and really having a facility that the township can be very proud of, and really open to all the residents. It's a wonderful facility, open space for years to come, and we're just very excited and have been really rewarded to be involved. So we appreciate it and thank everybody on the phone.
Thank you, Ben. And Chris, can we hear from you? Your boots on the ground every day with everyone who visits our golf course. So can you share with the public a little bit about particularly this transition through COVID and how the anticipated rounds to be played have increased, and where we are and where you see us in the next couple of years?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the chance to take a minute just to be brief and speak. But yeah, it's been a great ride so far. 19 was a great year, 20 with all the COVID restrictions and the changes that were always changing. The team did a great job of adapting to that. We put out a great golf product. We were able to get a lot of repeat customers, a lot of new faces, and the courses just continuing to develop. We're continuing to work on areas and identify areas that need to be improved so that we can put out a great product and have this that's something that's going to be here for a very long time and be here for everyone to enjoy.
Thank you, and congratulations to you, Chris, for your great accomplishments, and happy that you're part of the team here with us at Rock Spring.
Thank you.
Thank you. To my council colleagues, I want to, as we know, when we do the public workshops, there is a public comment section. I would like to hear from the public before we have our discussions, just so that we can consider their thoughts, their questions, as we begin to discuss amongst ourselves in the administration, any questions that we have for them. So is Lauren?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
I'm just going to bring up the timer.
wonderful, thank you.
No problem.
And to the public, we are going to open the floor for public comment, and I see hands already up. So as soon as our Madam Moderator is set to go, it will be the same as we host when we are doing our town council meeting. So Madam Moderator.
Thank you. Yes, if you have not joined us, or if you just want to hear it again, if you'd like to speak, it's the raise your hand button located at the bottom of your screen. You do not have to wait for anyone to stop talking in order to be put in the queue. As soon as you hit it, you're put in the queue, and I have all that information there. I want to apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name. I will be using the name that you did type in when you joined the webinar, so keep an ear out for that. So we have Shilpa Mankakar. If you can please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, this is Shilpa Mankakar, 7 Reed Street, REID.
Thank you.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to thank the town council and Mayor Parisi for everything that you're doing for the town, and especially in this crazy year. So we live around the corner from Rock Spring Golf Course, and our neighborhood is called Rock Spring. And to be honest, we've lived in West Orange for 40 years. We were never even allowed to go there because we weren't members, unless somebody's boss invited you. So when this issue first came up, we were ambivalent. You told us it wasn't going to cost anything to the taxpayers, and Green Acres is going to cover it. Now, over the summer, we got annoyed by the taxes going up 10.5% in the middle of a pandemic when people had been laid off of their jobs. We put together this petition that got 200 signatures that I had mentioned in August at another meeting. And on top of that, on June 20th, John Gross, the township CFO, said that the township was actually under budget, 2.7 million, behind net spent as usual, because of the pandemic closure. So this whole thing of like, oh, the tax base is going to increase because of the golf course seems like a farce to me at this point. If you go to Asbury Park, you see the Green Acres sign on the boardwalk. We found out over the summer that actually the proposal has not even been submitted to Green Acres for the golf course, and you don't see a sign there that it is subsidized by that. So that, first of all, seems like a farce and that we were lied to. Secondly, okay, fine, now there's a pandemic and West Orange has become a staycation destination because nobody could go on vacation. And we went for walks and found out how nice the golf course is that we never went to all these years. And we also found out there's supposedly this gold rush of real estate. Now, we've been following West Orange real estate for the last 5 years. Our home appreciated on the apps, including MLS and Realtor.com, $250,000 based on South Orange, Livingston and Orange, which are in the 1 mile radius. Our yard is half in South Orange. So technically we could classify as South Orange. Now, we were told by 5 real estate companies that actually they won't sell a house over $700,000, and they for some reason look down on West Orange. Unless it's in Llewellyn Park, they will not show a home over $700,000 in West Orange. So there was a house literally across from the golf course with a view of the golf course, a mansion on sale for $850,000 for 5 years. They wouldn't show it. Finally, because of coronavirus and this pandemic, they dropped the price to $700,000 and finally sold it. A home half the size sold for $700,000 down the block. Another home double the size of the one that sold for $700,000 also sold for $700,000. You see what I'm saying? So it seems to me like some of these real estate companies own condos in the city or something. They're trying to develop here and make West Orange some sort of a cash cow and get these subsidies from our taxes that we're never going to see again, apparently. And meanwhile, they're keeping our property values down. And I don't see why. I mean, West Orange is full of celebrities. Even a $1.5 million estate, 5-acre estate in Llewellyn Park didn't sell for 10 years in Llewellyn Park with a sculpture garden. And there's some sort of thing, it seems like modern day redlining, if you ask me. And I think that town should look into this, or I don't know if there's some sort of kickback coming back where they're getting a tax incentive from what we've heard over the last year with the redevelopment and designating West Orange as a derelict town in need of rehabilitation, which is frankly ridiculous. I mean, if anything would improve property values, it is getting these higher end taxes. If you're comparing a $1.5 million studio apartment in Queens with a Japanese toilet that flushes itself to like a mansion in West Orange, it seems pretty obvious to me that there's something strange going on here. And if you're looking for commuters, why not designate the train station a derelict area in need of rehabilitation, which actually is falling apart and is full of, you know, abandoned buildings that are toxic. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have James McFarland. If you can please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record. James McFarland, if you can follow the prompt that's on your screen. And one more call to James McFarland. Okay, I'm going to come back to James. And next we're going to have Nicole Jadek. If you can please follow the prompt on your screen.
Hi, thank you for having this. It was a lot that I didn't know. So I'm at 17 Maple Avenue up in the same neighborhood as the previous caller. I just have a question. You know, in isolation, this sounds like a wonderful idea, but with the other 2 developments right off of Northfield within half a mile from there, I would be remiss if I did not express concern over traffic. And I am a school administrator in a different district, and I certainly would be concerned with if St. Cloud can handle the influx in student population. I do know from professional experience that doesn't always happen when you're dealing with rental properties, but it's certainly something that is of note. And again, in isolation, this seems like a wonderful idea, but the totality of the area and the fact that there are 3 developments that are occurring on within a half a mile of a strip of Northfield is certainly concerning. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd failed to mention before that if there is someone who had called in and would like to speak, they can push *9. I just want to make sure that that is available for you. Next, we're going to try James McFarland again. If you can follow the prompt that's on your screen. Hi, James.
Hi, sorry about that. I was logged in my phone and desktop as well.
That's okay.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Mayor. I took screenshots of every slide, and it's very
I'm so
thorough.
sorry, Mr. McFarland. I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you please just say your address, please, for the record?
Yes, 3 West Road. So near the golf course. So thanks again for the presentation, following this issue really well. I have more questions rather than comments at this point. So I think the first one is around just one of the assumptions earlier in the presentation around the expenses for the golf club being so low during COVID, and when, you know, COVID goes away, that they would, you know, all go up. So I understand, yes, maybe some additional services there, but I just want to challenge that, you know, why would we add those additional costs back if they didn't provide anything such as contactless check-in and food and dining, if they didn't also deliver revenue increases in some way? It just business-wise, you know, that would make sense. So just challenging that assumption. Love to hear a comment around that. The other thing was, yeah, more around what would be built in the development area. I wanted to know if there's any restrictions, you know, on the residential type. I think the talk of a senior community had kind of been floated at some point. Maybe that was related to the division when it was down on Northfield Avenue. Certainly interested in that. Maybe that would also sort of talk to, you know, what the demand on the schools and things like that would be, as well as the sort of, I guess, type of people that are living there. The 300 units did seem high compared to other estimates I'd seen before. You know, there's certainly a lot of units, so I'd love to probably see that come down a little bit if that's possible. And that sort of relates to my next question about how that area would access, you know, getting out of there, like to Northfield Avenue. Would that potentially be on that new road? I know, you know, 300 is a lot of units. You add the golf course traffic, that starts to feel like a really busy road. And living just, you know, to not even a block from that area, which is now desolate. It just seems like a lot. So yeah, I'm trying to understand, you know, how that kind of would work. And then I think, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'd love to sort of, you know, if the club is accessible and this all happens, you know, just see how it would be, you know, potentially cheaper for West Orange people to play like it is today, and see if, you know, that could still be, you know, attractive to local people, as well as sort of attracting all these people from wide areas. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have John Cantor. If you can please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Sure, this is John and Leslie Cantor, 56 Undercliff Terrace South, obviously West Orange.
Thank you.
Some of the things that weren't discussed and would be important to me, if it's going to be 300 units, are they apartments or are they condos? Are they going to be 1 or 2 bedroom apartments? Are they going to be larger? We didn't discuss if they're just apartments, how will that impact the school system? At 300 units, we only need, by my back of the notebook thing, 60 students would eat up $1 million worth of tax revenue. So I'm not sure how this is going to be tax positive if students are going to be coming to the school system. The other thing that I wasn't sure of, when the mayor talked about the selling price of the property, I recently sold to a developer right locally, and the going rate starts at around $20,000 per unit that's buildable. So that would be $6 million for the property. And I realize that they have a lot of infrastructure they have to put in, but yet that's usually covered by the developer. If I am guessing this is going to be a mid-rise or high-rise building, again, they didn't say how tall this building would be or how it was going to be located on the property would have a beautiful view of New York, and it would certainly create a lot of revenue for whoever the developer is. My wife has a question too. Ms. Leslie.
Yes, hi. Same address. More comments from the beginning of this conversation about the golf course. I've heard nothing but golf in some way with development to help fund the golf. And then I hear open space, but we live across the street from the golf course, and the only time open space walking around on the golf course is in the winter because nobody's there. Otherwise, you're taking your life in your hands if you intend to walk around in the summer in open space. So the open space concept to me is kind of an illusion, because the interest of that I'm seeing is being proposed is golf. And if you have 47,000 people in this town, and 9,000 or so of which from West Orange are known to play, it seems that the other part of the community is not, their interests in this property are not being addressed. And I understand that other communities in New Jersey, when the tax base will not, or the town doesn't want to support tax bases, let's say for a pool or whatever, they encourage membership development. So even at 20,000 people at $100 each a year, you've got $2 million there in order to run the space as some kind of a park, education center, garden center. It doesn't necessarily have to be the golf course. And I'm hearing that golfers are interested in maintaining golf courses, but I think Jersey has a lot of golf courses, and the purpose of this purchase was to afford the people of this town, not just golfers, something that will enhance the value of everything in our lives in this town, rather than just more development, a new 1,200-foot road and more golf. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Carol Selman. If you can please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Yes, it's.
Oh, I think I muted you when you unmuted yourself. You can re-unmute yourself. That was my fault, Carol.
Right.
Sorry about that.
No, and I've never done this before, so it's new to me too. It's 30 Collmore Terrace in West Orange, New Jersey, and I'm probably the only one on this call who actually met and interviewed and did an article on one of the founders from 1925. So I have a long history with the Rock Spring Club. I never, of course, been a member. It was a very restricted club, but I am familiar with the clubhouse, and that's where I just want to ask a question. And it's this: I know that the preference clearly for all in the presentation and all involved is for a new clubhouse. But if this plan were to be used as it now stands, can I make a little plea as a longtime former commissioner for West Orange Historic Preservation to really consider the existing clubhouse on kind of 2 or 3 bases. One, the most environmentally sound building is a repurposed building. A creative architect can do remarkable work with an existing building without contributing, vast amounts of landfill. And I haven't seen this clubhouse in over 50 years, so I really can't talk to its architectural merits, but I think that the existing Historic Preservation Commission should perhaps be consulted on that potential. So I'm a little doing this. I haven't done it before, but
Uh-oh, Carol, I think we
Fine,
lost you.
can we stop the clock?
Yes,
Thank you.
no problem. Carol, are you there? We see if, I'm not sure if you can hear us.
Yes, I am there.
Oh, okay, we lost you about
I can-
15 seconds ago.
Okay. I just said, I really just want to make a plea for considering, if this plan were to go forward in this particular format. And I think that the Cantors raised some very, very apposite points really to be considered. But if it were, I really would like to make a plea for a much stronger consideration for the environmental impact of taking the clubhouse down instead of potentially reusing it. Did you lose me again?
No, we got you.
Okay. Yeah.
Was that all?
Well, and I guess since others have made some sort of, universal statements, I am also a little concerned that West Orange doesn't seem to have any kind of architectural review that I know of, and I could be completely wrong, in which case, I'd be happy to be wrong. But, I do feel that I've certainly have done articles on other communities where there is a real pressure on developers and builders to do LEED buildings. I'm not necessarily talking about platinum buildings or gold buildings, but to really have some environmental features and creative environmental features. And I just feel that unfortunately West Orange, which I could hold up book after book from decades ago about the natural beauty of this area, none of which any of us, some really unfortunate buildings have gone up. And to say one that will not insult anybody, it's not their home, it's
I'm just gonna wait for Carol. I'm not sure if you can hear me. We lost you again. Oh, are you there?
I'm so sorry. I've got an unstable connection. Am I there?
Yeah, you're here now. The last thing we heard was that you didn't want to insult anyone. It wasn't their home. Oh,
right.
Carol, I'm sorry we lost you again. And she's actually now dropped off the call itself. So maybe we can get her back. She still has a minute left. Okay, next I have, it's just listed as Jim. So if Jim, if you can give us your name and address for the record.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
All right, it's Jim Hall. Sorry about that. I'm not good with Zoom. And I live at 14 Hillcrest Avenue.
Thank you.
So I don't really have a question. I'd just like to, first off, I'd like to thank Mayor Parisi. I think the purchase of Rock Spring was a visionary event. And I completely understand all the things he talked about all of the competing interests and the competing goals that we have to think about here. Having said that, that kind of situation frequently results in a Frankenstein's monster, right? You're trying to put all these pieces together. And I mean, this is the first time I've gotten to see this plan, but with all due respect to everybody, and I'm not, again, it's a hard job, but to me, this is a Frankenstein's monster. And I would just really, really ask the council when they're considering this to take their time and take a lot of public comment. I mean, I'm a little bit disappointed that we weren't able to see this plan before this call. But there are, to me, a whole bunch of problems, and I'm not going to waste your time with my opinions, although someday I might. But two things that just sort of jump out at me are the idea that a clubhouse down where it is being presented is more valuable than the clubhouse where it is, I'm not trying to be mean, but like borderline laughable. The clubhouse where it is has an incredible view of Manhattan and has an incredible view of the sunset over the lake. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with it, but that location is worth so much in terms of a place for West Orange residents to enjoy and a place that could be used to be a major revenue generator, right? You can have events there and a public place to eat. That compared to at least what I saw on the slide to where they want to put it now is a joke. You get neither of those things. So that's just one issue. And I'm being a little cute here, and I apologize, Kyle. Your bona fides are amazing, but I guarantee you that, again, I just saw the drawing. 1 out of 6 balls hit off the first tee is going to slice into your 18th green. And P.S. I've done it 100 times. So, I mean, those are just 2 silly examples, and I apologize. But I really, really, really exhort the council to not just go charging forward with this plan. I think there are a lot of issues. They need to be thought about carefully. I understand that developers may have given you guys a lot of input, but the developers do not necessarily have a unity of interest with the town. And so, again, for tonight's purposes, I'll stop yapping, but I really ask you guys, let's take our time. Let's think about this. Let's get plenty of public conversation going about it. Again, with all due respect to the professionals here, there are a lot of people that know Rock Spring and the neighborhood very, very well. And so I would just respectfully ask the council to take their time and think about this and get lots of public comments. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next, it's just listed as John. So if John can follow the prompt on their screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, this is John Butler, 21 Rayner Road.
Thank you.
So just a couple of things. One on the cost about the COVID. I do agree with the other public member who mentioned that, the costs, while they may go up for food service, they should probably bring in added business. And as well as the gentleman from Kemper mentioned, it was reduced usage last year with the month-long closure, plus about another month where you could only allow twosomes out. So I would look at what the actual number of rounds are this year to get a better feel for what it will be bringing in for years in the future. Question 2 is, what is the time frame for some of this construction? Are you envisioning it to happen over, to start in 12 months, to start in 6 months? And how long would this construction be going on? Is it something that's going to be 5 to 10 years, or, is it going to be more accelerated? Another question, when we first were talking about the original plans, Mayor Parisi had mentioned potentially doing a 55 plus community. Is that still on the table, or is that gonna be a general use? And in which case you do have the school issue to worry about. And then the last question is, from what I can see, it looks like that road is going to go right along the backyard of the people that live on West Road. Is that in fact a correct assumption? And up towards the tennis courts. And I would also there reiterate that the views from the current clubhouse, I think, would be far superior than any of the views from a clubhouse relocated to the existing front parking lot where the tennis courts are. That's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have, John, don't worry about that prompt that I just sent you. We have Laura Corsetto. If you can please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, yep, this is Laura Corsetto. I have my husband Josh Young here as well in case he wants to ask questions or have comments. And our address is 66 Edgewood, which is right across Northfield from, I believe, where the entrance to the development is being proposed.
Okay, thank you.
So I think I have a lot of the same comments and questions as some of the other folks do on the call. You know, my biggest comment that I really hope the town council takes into consideration is, you know, we've heard about a potential cap on, or like an unofficial cap on residential property values here, and some other things about the town that cause people to maybe think twice about moving here. And I think the biggest complaints that I've heard or seen on social media and newspaper outlets and other things about the town is access to commuter transportation is basically a non-existent downtown, and is just in general the traffic that happens all over town, in areas during normal times. Obviously COVID times have been different, but usually traffic both in the mornings and the afternoons is pretty horrendous. And so as a resident living in this area of town and seeing the massive cookie cutter apartment building developments that are going up, I'm just really confused as to why the town is allowing this to happen when none of this addresses, you know, kind of the big concerns that there's had with the town. So, you know, to me, it doesn't matter if it's a 55 plus community or if it's families or commuters or whoever. It's a fallacy that residential buildings don't add stress on infrastructure. So if it's 55 plus, you're looking at adding stress to our senior services, which also, you know, are better than some areas, but not as good as they could be, or there's a lot of complaints from seniors about the senior services. If it's families, it's adding stress on schools. And as a parent that has one child at St. Cloud and is going to have two more going through there, it's already a race. If you don't get on kindergarten registration or school registration, your child may not be able to go to St. Cloud because there are so many families in this neighborhood. And I know there's other schools in town that are like that too. So that fill up and cause kids in the neighborhood to have to go to other schools. So I just see a lot of investment in things that are really not in the best interest of the taxpayers in town. I don't see anything that's reducing tax revenue. Again, it's increasing tax base, but it's increasing strain on infrastructure. And so that tax base increase is going to immediately go away when the services are all of a sudden not acceptable for the now new amount of residents that are there. And you know, that also includes police and fire. So, you know, and when the golf course was first purchased, again, there was talk about Green Acres money, and apparently we haven't seen any of that. There was talk about ways to offset and really preserve this entire property as open space. And now we're talking about trying to, you know, develop it past what it is and, you know, move clubhouses and do all these things that are just probably not needed in order to maintain revenue generation on that property. There's other golf courses and things that do that without rearranging all of this stuff, and spending this money when the town should be spending it in other places. You know, so that kind of covers, I would say, my comments. Let me see, Josh. Okay, nope, I guess we're good. So we'll give some time back. But yeah, it feels like the last person just said, that this is a rush. This is being rushed through. It's not being thought out. There's a lot of bad decisions here. And, you know, as a resident that's in the area, you know, it doesn't make me happy that I moved into this area, you know, 9 years ago. And it's just going to turn into a massive group of apartment blocks. So yeah, that's my comment.
Hey, thank you. Okay, next, it's just listed as Kibutu, Kibutu, pardon my pronunciation. If you can follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Mark. My address is 48 Greenwood Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I just have, I have two quick comments. One is, it was, we were happy when we heard about the purchase. It was very exciting. West Orange has always had like 6 or 7 golf courses. Only one was public. So to have the second one open to the public was very exciting, and being bought by the town was even better. But one thing we never had was a resident rate, which I'm not sure why, but being a resident in the town owning the course, I've always felt like the West Orange residents should have had some special rate for them. It doesn't make sense for us living here, doing the ratables, paying the same rate as people from other towns or other states or even other countries. And it should be only fair that it should be one of the bigger considerations. I remember playing at East Orange Golf Course and a few years ago, and even though it's out there in Melbourne, it's owned by East Orange, and the residents of East Orange would pay like $9 when we were paying $50. So I just hope that will at least count for something for us. The second thing is, I'm curious. I'd just like to find out from the board or from the council, what are the considerations for any minority involvement in this project, whether it's the design or construction or development? Like, is there any considerations for minorities or not? And just in response to what some other people have talked about, I do agree with the location of the clubhouse. I'm not sure how it got about to move it down to the middle of no view. I don't know why that would be better than the location it is at right now. And the clubhouse is actually was well designed, and it can be modernized and just also maybe just rehabilitated to make it much more efficient. Yes, so that's all on my end. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Harvey Grossman. If you can please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Harvey Grossman, I'm the public advocate, and I live at 4 Reed Street, which is between John Hall and Shilpa Monkikar. I live behind, that is behind the golf course. Now, I am very pleased that the proposal reduces the area for development from 11 or 12 acres to 6 acres. That's a positive. However, I do agree with Mr. Hall and the last caller about the location of the clubhouse. It makes no sense to relocate the clubhouse to which gets rid of the view, which is one of the very attractive things about it. So the other thing that I have to say is that ordinarily when we have proposals for development, it involves a developer who comes before the planning or zoning board and makes a presentation for permission from the township. This situation is different because we own the property, and it is our decision which will determine the nature and extent of the development. That having been said, I have a problem with an elevated garage deck, I would think that it would be much less intrusive if it was an underground garage. It would change everything. The last thing that we want is a development that looks down on the golf course. It destroys the aesthetics. Now, I have a couple of other comments. This development should not be rushed. Rock Spring is really the crown jewel of all of our township assets. Thank you for Mayor Parisi for your vision in initiating this project, but there is no need to rush this. Firstly, we do see a dramatic success of the golf course as it presently exists, and it generates substantial income, which really balances out the loss of tax revenue. So, we don't have to act quickly. It's not going to be a financial negative. Going back to the nature of the application and the fundamental difference between the township owning the property and a developer, my own feeling is that we should make a request for anyone that is interested in the property to submit a plan so that we can decide what it would be most appropriate for the area. If we have requests for proposals, I just think that we'll get a better result. Now, the developer that is suggested by Mayor Parisi sounds like a fine company, but it's not the only one. This property is as desirable as Llewellyn Park. Think about this. Some form of residential development on a historic golf course. Any development should be, I say, on the same level as Llewellyn Park. I want to see what it will look like. And really, we're just getting maps and proposals, and I don't think that is sufficient for a decision to be made. There is no rush in this case. You do not want to be known as the administration that broke Rock Spring. The quality of this development will determine the future of Rock Spring, and we have to think fast and hard. We need competitive proposals, and we do need three-dimensional renderings to see exactly what we are getting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Henry Johnson. If you can please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening. This is Henry Johnson, 22 Rock Spring Road.
Thank you.
I have a couple comments and concerns. One of my biggest concerns when this property was purchased and we went down to the meeting was that, we were trying to stop a big developer from doing some big development. And it just seems like that's what's going on now. It's just in the city control, and the neighborhood really doesn't have any say. The city can do what they want, and we can't really do anything about it. Unlike a developer, there's more pressure on the council and the mayor to do what's right by the town, do what's right by the neighborhood. So it would make it a little bit harder for a private developer to kind of get in there and do what they want. Second thing is, I'm not sure if this is accurate or not, but moving the clubhouse could open up a way for the city to also sell off that piece of property, because that is the most valuable piece of Rock Spring Road, or the Rock Spring Country Club itself. So I'm just not sure, how do we go about, everybody's saying the revenue is great, but the revenue is only great because there's nothing being paid off on the loan yet. Once the loan kicks in, the payment starts kicking in, the golf club doesn't make anything. It's actually in the negative. So I just want to be kind of clear on that and get some, after this year, once there's a mortgage being paid, then we'll know really what the revenue is. One of the other callers had mentioned that, you know, the taxes are high and there's nothing for really the township, I mean, for the people in West Orange that live here. I really think that West Orange, with all the development they have going on, should really focus on what the citizens in town really need. You know, we have a ton of things going on. We have Essex Green, which is kind of failing. There's a lot of vacant stores. You know, we need to concentrate on kind of making that a kind of a restaurant row where people in the township can go and have great food. We need to increase the jitney to full time to run all day. And even if people had to pay, you know, a certain amount of money a month, I think people would understand that. But it gives people access to the town and the New York train or whatever, you know, something that gives people amenities in the town. I mean, you go to other towns, they have, you know, all year basketball courts, all year tennis, everything is from the township. Right now, all we have is hockey and we have golf. So it just seems like we're catering to one group of people. And I think, you know, West Orange is a very unique town and very diverse. And I don't think we're catering to everyone in town like we should. And again, you know, I think this thing is very rushed. I think there needs to be a real concrete plan on this development. I kind of had an inkling of this happening where the township buys it and now they're going to develop it because, again, golf courses just don't make money. That's why they sold it. You have a golf course, you have 2 golf courses right down the street from here. I mean, it's just, how many golf courses can you have, you know, at the end of the day? So I knew this was going to happen. And, you know, now it's just trying to prepare for the best case scenario, selling it off, making a viable piece of property. And, you know, again, it's not going to lower taxes. We all know that. The taxes are what they are. Nothing's going to be lowered. But, you know, making it something that's appealing to the township, to the neighborhood, and, you know, creating an extension of what West Orange, you know, already is. But again, I just think the township and the council and everybody just need to really concentrate on the amenities that the town needs for citizens to, you know, to understand why they're paying so much in taxes. And that's, I think, why you're getting such a pushback on a lot of stuff, because we're not getting anything. Developers are coming in here making a ton of money and, you know, walking away. Hell, who cares if it fails? Look at what's happening on Main Street. I mean, that's like a disaster. I mean, you have a whole downtown that's, you know, of storefronts that are vacant. And the developer doesn't, you know, he's not really doing anything. You know, it doesn't really matter to him because he's made his money. So again, I think, you know, I really want the council to deal with the amenities for the town itself. What would be, you know, best for the town itself and the people to get around town, develop Essex Green so it could be a viable piece that everybody can enjoy, along with the movie theater and more shops and restaurants. And you know, again, the clubhouse situation, again, I don't understand moving it. I understand why you would move it, because again, that's the most valuable piece of property there. And if all goes wrong with the golf course, that would be the most valuable piece that you can sell off. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Michaela Bennett. Michaela, if you can follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Michaela Bennett, Old Indian Road. Just a comment or two and then a couple of questions. First of all, I wanted to echo Mr. Grossman and thank him for his comments. Really, I think it's very important to ask, what is the rush? I don't know why this township always seems to be rushing and making sure that the council gets something on the agenda and making sure that the council gets a decision done. Think about, you're going to lose library funding if you don't make a decision, or you need to slam through executive drive for the approvals and get it moved onto your agenda. And now here we are hurrying up to get Rock Springs subdivided. You're either the floppiest administration who cannot plan, or you're agenda'd. But you always seem to manufacture emergencies and this sense of urgency that gets everyone thinking that they need to lean in and overlook and not stop and contemplate. So to that end, did you ever notice that despite all the development that occurs here in West Orange, the taxes continue to go up and skyrocket. I would just ask that, I mean, look, before I put questions out that I would hope the council would get asked and answered, I just want to point out to everyone on the call listening that the reason to move the clubhouse is because the clubhouse is, as Jim described, on the best part of the property. And so if you want to attract the highest price from a developer or the best possible price from future residents, you situate the subdivided property for the development in the best possible view. So that best possible view, when there's a high rise on top of it and a parking structure on top of it, and I disagree with Mr. Grossman, you can't go underground because of Cable Lake and its depth and because of the fact that you're on a cliff. So you're going to basically obstruct the best part of the view with a high rise and a parking deck. Okay. And that best view goes to a developer and 300 new residents. And, you know, look, I'm just going to put it out there. I don't believe for a second that you're going to woo and attract the developer that you threw up there that looks like the perfect fit, right? I think that that'll fall through, unfortunately, because that developer won't agree to all of the requirements that you have. And then your favorite developer du jour will come in and rescue the day, and you'll sweeten the pot for that group. But leaving that aside, I think it's important to understand, and I would hope that the council would ask and be certain that the location of the development, the housing particularly, is at the easternmost boundary of the property. So overlooking and above the Gregory neighborhood. I think it's important to understand the number of units proposed, because back when Rock Springs purchase was on the agenda, I thought I remembered hearing 120, 130, 160 units, somewhere in that ballpark. But I know Mayor Parisi just told everybody 300 units. You know, again, Avalon Bay, are they interested? Are they committed? Are we actually going to work with them? Or is that just a very attractive, neutral developer to put in front of your noses so that you won't be alarmed with all the other things that have occurred most recently in this town? Is this one of your typical float a scenario to get your subdivision from the council and then switch up and push forward with the developers most likely to pad your pockets? How does the council assure that you won't play the same deed games that you just played down at 555 Northfield Avenue? Was the DPW removed from the plan? I think it's important to pause, take stock, review, and expect an awful lot more before you make a decision about subdividing a property that you will not be able to take back. And then the only other comment I make is other residents have made it, and I'd like to underscore it. When you did your little sales pitch about purchasing the property, you talked about Green Acre funding, and that was just a complete fallacy. And I really think that the council should have, you know, due diligence in ensuring that these aren't just a bunch of lies to get your permission again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tom Edwards. Tom, if you could please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Tom Edwards. I live at 26 Rock Spring Road. And I more have a comment than a question. There have been several people in the past few minutes, Jim Hall, Henry Johnson, a few others who have spoken about the clubhouse. The concept of tearing down a $5 million clubhouse to rebuild a $5 million clubhouse is unusual, I would say at best. And the most important part of all of this that I've heard tonight, except for back up one step, there's a lot that goes into this, so I appreciate that. And there's a lot of thinking that went into it, and we appreciate that. But in the end, the plan that you've proposed is to give a developer the most important part of the entire lot of the 138 acres. That one piece is worth more or as much as the entire property to a developer. And so reflecting on what Mr. Johnson said, we need to be very careful that we put our interests first and not be swayed by the developers. That's my main comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I get to the last couple of people here, I just wanted to make a final call for anyone who has not raised their hand yet who would like to speak. This is the time to do that. If you're one of our call-in patrons, it is *9. And again, you do not have to wait for anyone else to stop talking. You will be put in a queue. So next we have Mel Valdez. Pardon, if you can follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Mel Julie Valdez and I live at 16 Elm Street.
Thank you.
So I have a few comments and a few questions regarding this project. I've been a longtime resident of West Orange, and my family chose to live here because of the community, the schools. And I'm now raising my daughter here and she is in the school system, and taxes is one of the concerns. Taxes have gone up a lot. And I don't see the benefits of, where taxes are increasing, and I feel like I have to constantly email the town to air my grievances, whether it's the garbage or it's street parking, or, I have to go to the council to have an ordinance amended. So, there's a lot of us that feel the same way. I'm not the only resident. I talk to a lot of residents and, we're getting fed up. We work very hard for our money and we're paying a lot in taxes and we're just not seeing it. Whereas I see that, the town, the Mayor Parisi, and the administration and the council, you guys are really, many people have said this, prior comments, trying to rush things through. I think what is important for you to do is focus on the residents that currently live here. And what I propose for you to do is that there should be some type of survey, an electronic survey that's sent to all residents, or something that's sent to see what residents, what kind of amenities do we want, what needs to be improved. A lot of people on this call said, we need jitney services to be provided, to be provided basically the whole day, more restaurants, commuter parking, commuter transportation, Main Street, a focus on also Essex Green, which is falling apart, and there's a bunch of potholes which need to be fixed. I'll be emailing you about that. And I really think that you need to take your time and do your due diligence. I feel that, it's been presentation after presentation, whether it's, the other presentations that you've had during these township meetings or these special meetings. And it's a lot. It's a lot that you're trying to cram in during this, very, very hectic year. We're still in a pandemic. So, I want to know, why are the units being increased when this was proposed? That it wasn't this many units, and now you're proposing more units. People also mentioned the clubhouse. Why is the clubhouse being moved? And my last thing is, what I would like to know is, why isn't this being opened up? Why aren't we, since this is such a coveted property, this was a great acquisition by the town, why aren't we asking, putting out a request for proposal for all developers? There are a lot of people in town that have, they might be connected to other people. They might be able to actually get somebody really great for this project that might fit with what the town needs, what the residents need. And, be able to preserve the green acres, be able to preserve the golf course, which, I hear is beautiful. And also, basically make this a win-win for everybody. So, I really am encouraging the council to please take this seriously and take it slowly and just do your due diligence and, make sure you do the work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, it is labeled as just Chris. So Chris, if you can follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record. Okay, once again, it's just labeled as Chris. If you can follow the prompt on your screen. Okay, I'm going to come back to Chris. And next I'm going to go to Beverly Riley. Okay, so Beverly is on a older version of Zoom, which cannot do what we're doing here. So Beverly, I don't want you to touch your computer. I'm going to move you over as a panelist, but then I'm going to turn your camera off so you'll be able to present your questions. So it'll just take one moment. Don't change anything on your screen. Okay, I'm going to bring them over. Okay, Beverly, I'm just going to turn your camera off. And I'm going to ask if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sure. We can just have your name and address for the record.
Yes, Beverly Riley, 56 Lenox Terrace in West Orange.
Thanks.
I want to thank you for this time to share this presentation with all of us. I, along with many other people, were very excited about the acquisition of this property. Today's presentation leaves me with some questions. So missing from the presentation was a slide about the benefits to the rest of the residents who are non-golfers. The presentation, from my perspective, focused on all the benefits for golfers and the developer, but I didn't see benefits for the other residents, the 40,000 plus, who don't right now play the game. And I remembered when the presentation was about the purchase of the property, there was discussion about 2 swimming pools, tennis courts, and perhaps platform tennis, I'm not really sure. And also that there was going to be some green space for walkers or other activities. There was no mention of that today, and that concerns me. And the other comment that I have is one that was shared by many of the speakers tonight, and that was about respect for the historical nature of this property. That plan I thought was so amazing, Mayor Parisi. It certainly should be framed from 100 years ago. But I would imagine that the architect who planned the clubhouse did some serious assessments of where the sun set and the view of the Manhattan skyline. Of course, it wasn't what it is today, which means that it even has increased in value. And I would ask you not to take down that clubhouse and turn it over to developers. And the only people who will benefit from it would be the condo owners or the renters, and the rest of us will be denied that magnificent view. So I would like to, though, in summary, I would say, please do not remove the clubhouse. And also I would like to see some slides that focus on what are the benefits for those of us who are non-golf players. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Once again, just don't do anything to your computer, and I'm going to shift you back over to an attendee. Thank you. Okay. Once again, before we get to the last couple of people, I want to make sure everyone has their chance to speak. If you want to use the raise your hand button, you do so at the bottom of your screen. Sally Malanga, if you can follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record, please.
Sally Malanga, 57 Ridge Road.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. In accordance with Occam's razor, the simplest solution is the best one. So I must ask, why do we need this complicated plan? Complexity is costly. The public needs to know How tall are these buildings? What is the effect on the landscape of this historic golf course of having these buildings and a parking deck, which are very, very ugly structures? The tax revenue is stated to be $1.7 million to $1.9 million, but what are the costs assessed against that? We've learned over the years that chasing ratables doesn't work, and we see it in action here in West Orange, as our taxes never balance out. They always go up every year. The cost of a unit typically is $1.10 to $1.40 for every dollar we bring in. So we're essentially constantly running a pyramid scheme on our taxes. It seems that the golf course already delivers enough tax revenue as a business. So the traffic and density are such a downside that it seems like a case of stuffing too much into an already beautiful place. Last, I'd like to know, what is the benefit to the developer of declaring the entire town an area in need of rehabilitation? Will this project not be bid out if it does go forward? And again, if it does go forward as planned, then we've privatized the beautiful view for 300 apartment dwellers and taken it away from all the people who use the golf course, which is many thousands of people. I suggest that this be, if not abandoned, rethought to be something that is more beneficial for the entire town. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Mark Rosenberg. Mark, if you can please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Yep, it's Mark Rosenberg, Fernwood Circle.
Thank you.
Yep. So I wanted to thank you for the presentation this evening. I thought it was timely. I know we were all expecting to see it, and so thank you for putting that together. Familiar with Avalon Bay? I know they're a large predominantly apartment developer. Would be interested to see this plan be issued as an RFP to sort of broaden the scope a little bit more, widen the net, and try to get a little bit more interest from the developer community as to maybe what the best use is. Have them play against each other, so to speak, have them outbid each other, so that the cost, predominantly the cost for the changes that would most likely need to happen, are actually coming from the developer rather than coming out of our pockets. I think I know from the original presentation, we talked about a master plan incorporating the Northfield corridor. I think it's still worthwhile, and I think we should still think of that as a worthy review. We had identified the 11 acres along Northfield as a potential development site. If we're now thinking that perhaps 6 acres will do, perhaps we could look at that site again and decide if that's not a higher and better use for the development in the future. There was a couple of comments here made about preserving the existing clubhouse and infrastructure. I think that goes again along the lines of what was discussed and by the town and also by the community as an important benefit to kind of reuse our existing amenities and infrastructure up there. The small amount of investment to keep those facilities operating would be a significant win in the long term. So hoping that's still being considered. Letting those buildings and all of that infrastructure fall into disrepair to only make the argument later that in fact it's worthy of being removed would be very unfortunate. And lastly, just along the lines of Sally's comments, I think she's correct. I think the easiest plans are probably the simplest plans. If in fact, the operator has been so successful, and this is seen as such a successful project, then why are we not asking Kemper to maybe think a little bit larger on how the existing site can be repositioned and used for higher and better use? We've yet to really tap into events spaces. I know we're coming out of COVID, but we're talking about event spaces and special spaces, unique revenue generating operators. In New Jersey alone, I know of 6 very successful who take significant buildings and locations throughout New Jersey and use them to create revenue and special spaces for communities. So I would hope that we can think about this a little bit bigger as an overall project. I know it's important to talk about it as a group. I would just hope that, considering that site that's been said here, I don't think a Acropolis style building overlooking West Orange is really the highest and best use for that particular site. So I hope that we can continue the conversation and make it as productive as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Seth Weisletter. Pardon my pronunciation if it's incorrect. If you can follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Yes, hi, Seth Weisletter, 262 DeRose Court in West Orange. I just happened to tune in a little late. I did not see the whole presentation, so forgive me if I'm not spot on with some of my comments, but just reading what was being posted on Facebook with some of the slides. I guess I'm curious, it seems like we didn't purchase this golf course too long ago. And the idea was to take our time, and with a huge piece of land, I'm actually looking at the golf course from my office. It's beautiful. I'm not sure what I'd be looking at if this goes through, but I guess a few things. I'm curious, have we, as the town, have we reached the potential with that golf course to bring in as much revenue as we possibly can with what we have to offset our tax dollars? I don't think we've reached the full potential. I've ridden my bike there. It's beautiful. You ride through a little neighborhood and wow, there you see this big oasis. I was out in Arizona and I was being taken to a hotel and driven through a neighborhood, and it was almost like approaching this country club, probably back in its day. And I asked the driver, I said, where was I? He says, we're going to be at the hotel. Don't worry, it's at the end of the block. I said, who has a hotel in a neighborhood? But it used to be an old mansion. It was beautiful. So I'm not sure what the overall strategy is for West Orange. It seems like we have a lot of rentals going up. I don't know how they're doing or how they're going to do. It seems like there's a big rental market, but I'm curious, how did this, developer find us? Why aren't we putting out proposals in there? We should be, West Orange is 30 minutes from New York. I'm sure there's developers across the country chomping at the bit for these types of buildings, and we should be more competitive. And we have something more to offer than just by accepting the first one that comes along or the second one. But I'm also curious from their point of view, who are these renters going to be? Are they families? Are families with kids? There's a lot of rentals being built 2 towns over in Harrison. I don't know how they're doing because they're near a big path station. So I'm not sure what the draw is going to be, and how, with 2 other buildings going up, and I believe there's some others in the mix from what I read and hear, it's hard really to follow all of this. But yes, we increase our tax revenue, but then we still have to invest in other things, public works, roads, snow plowing, salting, all the other costs that will increase. So it'd be interesting to see what that potential increase will be on our schools, because our school board is our largest tax. That's where most of our taxes go. So I still think and I've lived here for 10 years in West Orange, and I'm not sure on the strategy of West Orange or where we're going as a town as a whole. And I think that's why there's so much controversy and things that come up, because it feels like these big projects pop up out of the blue. Some of them great, some of them not so good, some of them affect me, some of them don't. But it would be nice to see what that overall strategy is for our township to really make us the best town in Essex County. So in my comments there, I think there's a lot more thought process that needs to be put into this. So thank you from my time, and I'll yield back my 1 minute.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, if we have anyone else from the public who would like to speak, it is the raise your hand button located at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see the button, just move your mouse and it'll reappear for you. And if you're one of our call-in listeners, it is *9. Thank you, Fred Arnstein. If you can follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Fred Aronstein. I live at 7 West Road in West Orange.
Thank you.
My house is really kind of directly across the street from the golf course. And I probably have to say that probably almost more than anybody in the town of West Orange, I probably have more skin in the game here than anybody, in the sense that I'm a huge golf fan. I play golf all the time. I actually was a member of the club last year. I played there probably 100 times last summer. Had a hole-in-one on number 6 a couple of years ago. And I'm just sort of looking at it from the point of view of what we're doing to our community, I guess West Orange as a whole, but in particular, the little sort of enclave that we have here on on Rock Spring Road and Rayner Road and West Road. What all this, I mean, 300 units that's a lot of people. You're talking about bringing 1,000 people into our neighborhood in order to maintain a golf course, which by all means, I love the golf course, great golf course. I played there yesterday. I love it. But I guess what I'm getting at is here, it seems like we're trying to maintain a golf course that benefits more people kind of outside of West Orange than it does the people inside West Orange. One of the things that was said earlier that sort of struck home to me was that we were sort of promised sort of green acres, some open space that the people of West Orange would be able to use. And it seems like we're really just catering to a very small segment of the West Orange population. I know, when I play there on the weekends, there's license plates from New York, from Connecticut, from all over the place. People come from everywhere. I'm always sort of amazed. People, get on the train and they take Uber, just to get here from New York City. But I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that it seems like we're going out of our way to keep a golf course and maintain a golf course for people that benefit people outside of West Orange instead of the community inside West Orange. I would love to see this thing all work out, but I just don't see 300 units is a lot of people to bring in. I'm actually in the development business. I work for the Rockefeller Group. We do developments all over the country. We have 3 multifamily developments going up right now in New York City. I would really like to see the pro forma on this particular development. It just doesn't seem to me like it pencils out. That on 6 acres of land, you can bring 300 apartments in and make it work. One of the things that I've learned in my years in development and doing these things is that you always have to take with a grain of salt the things that people put in a pro forma. More times than not, the things that they project don't come to fruition. So I guess just in the long and the short of it is, there's probably nobody in West Orange that would love to see this golf course succeed. I would love to see Kyle France come in and make a beautiful, beautiful golf course here for all of us to use. But I think the downside here is bringing this development into our small little community and how it's going to change the community here in our part of West Orange. Yeah, and thanks for the slides. I'm just kind of looking at it. It looks like the road that you're proposing to put in goes right through kind of the backyards of the people on West Road, which just seems, I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to visualize. But thanks for your time. The presentation was great. I appreciate it. I know you guys have put a lot of work into it. I've actually spoken with Richard, who lives across the street, a couple of times about it. I'm very interested, but that's just kind of how I feel at this point. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. And we have Kevin Malanga. If you can please follow the prompt on your screen and give us your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Kevin Malanga, Ridge Road. Good evening, Council President, members of the council, Mayor Parisi. Mayor Parisi, thank you for your presentation. It was very clear and thorough. You might remember that when this was originally proposed 3 years ago or so, I was one of two people who objected at the meeting at the high school pertaining to this. But I do appreciate what's been done. I knew nothing about Rock Spring. I'd never been there. I objected to government being involved in business, but I'm glad that the town bought the golf course. And I hope that the township preserves it as it is as a golf course. We have to figure out the economics of it and make it work. Not put in 300 units on the top of the mountain and create this scar on the top of the hill. Is it going to be something like the Claridge House #2? That's 330 units in Verona on top of a hill. Is that what it's going to be? Is it going to look like that? Is it going to be that kind of scale? Let's figure out how to make Rock Spring at least break even, if not profitable. It's a beautiful venue. It's a beautiful landscape. I've come to appreciate it greatly. My wife and I cross-country skied there 3 times a week this past winter because of all the snow. And let's preserve it as it is. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And at this time, my final call, if we have anyone else who would like to speak, using the raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're a call-in patron, it is *9. Okay, seeing none, that is all of the hands that are raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Certainly appreciate how easily and seamlessly you moderate for us. So certainly thanks to you. Before I start with council discussion, I just want to stress to the public that this is not a matter that is on an agenda. This is a matter for council. We're seeing this for the first time, as you are. Our workshops are intended to include you in the process with us as we are presented with proposals from the administration. And this is the time that we take as a council to discuss matters. We are not making any decisions at this time. I'm sure my council colleagues have a lot of questions in addition to some of your questions that were proposed for the administration, but this provides both insight to our process of government, but also it also elevates your voices for myself and my council colleagues to consider your concerns and your thoughtful questions as well as we begin the process. I don't want to say that this is rushed because this is the start of a conversation. The administration did not share anything with us prior to this. And so I'm looking forward to council discussion. For the sake of time and because this is a council workshop, I'm going to ask my council colleagues, should they want to respond to the public, to please do so at a later time. But this is the time for us to engage with the administration and questions. If there are, because I don't think we have answers to a lot of the questions proposed, that would be up to the administration to engage in if they so choose at this time. But I would like council discussion at this time.
Council President, could I just clarify a few things that might answer some of the questions from the council? Again, I'm not going to answer all the public's comments, but just for clarification.
Okay,
And,
please.
and again, I try to be clear. Lord knows every time I sat down, I added another slide. So, but maybe I wasn't clear. There's no rush. There's nothing on the agenda. We're not asking the council to vote on anything tonight or tomorrow. It is kind of funny that we've been accused of rushing. It's been 2 years. 2 years in the making. Council members have been asking for months when we're going to have a plan. So it's funny that the public perceives it as a rush where this has been taken forever. So we're not, there's no deadlines. This is what we've come up with based on what we see as addressing as many of the concerns as we can. And I know a few members of the public and the council members might have the same questions. We're not abandoning the Green Acres application, but just to be clear, and again, maybe sometimes I assume that everyone knows these things just because we live this and maybe the public doesn't. We can't make a Green Acres application until we determine what, if any, of the land will be developed. That's the only reason we didn't make a Green Acres application immediately. During the original proposals and presentations, we said we would make a Green Acres application because we assumed that 11 to 15 acres on Northfield would be set aside and the rest would be preserved. Once we determined that we were intent on keeping the course 18 holes, that went away. So we have every intent of completing a Green Acres application, but until we as a community determine if a piece of land is going to be set aside for potential development, whether now or in the future, we can't make the application. We have every intention of. So the council should not believe that we at all have abandoned the intention, but we as a community have to decide what we will submit as an application, and that means determining if any of the land will be developed. The idea of number of units, and I tried to kind of speak to that. The reason that the number of units has increased from what we originally discussed with the community is simply because by keeping it 18 holes, the costs increase because we're working with less land. So I understand a lot of these things are all tied together, but I was disappointed in myself with so many of the comments from the public because they clearly, I guess I wasn't clear enough in explaining some of the reasons for these things. So that was not the intent. The original intent was what was presented 2 years ago was in the 175 to 200 units. But when you can't use the land we talked about, you have to move the land. And what's the most developable piece of land? Yeah, it's the most expensive piece up top. We get that. But if we keep the clubhouse there, where do you develop and keep 18 holes? The course just isn't big enough. That's the problem. And I know some of the residents expressed concerns about not a public component. Well, again, that goes back to the 18 holes. If we as a community, popularity and Kemper be damned, want public spaces, we can turn it into a 9-hole course and develop a ton of public spaces. That was the original plan, which is why there was a bunch of public uses. So I hate to say cause and effect, but we're here today because of the success of the course. And we can decide as a community, we don't want to develop any piece. We'll suck it up and continue to support it and put money in it when it's necessary. That's fine. This was just a concept. We're not asking the council to vote on anything. This is unveiling a concept that addresses some of the concerns and some of the objectives going back 2 years to the original presentations before council even approved the sale. This was a concept that addresses those concerns. If we as a community decide because of the popularity we want to change the objectives, then that's why we're here tonight. So it always disappoints me when people say we're rushing things. We've been talking about this for 2 years, so I don't really see that as a rush. And again, there's no deadline. We're not asking the council to vote on anything. This was after 2 years. This is unveiling to the council and the community what we see as the way towards addressing the original objectives. If we decide the original objectives are different now, then that's fine too. That's why we're here, and that's why we're taking input, and that's why we're here to hear the council and looking forward to address your questions. So thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Mayor Parisi, for that. And as I'm listening to public comments, I couldn't help but wonder if you had, at least for some of us who objected to your initial desire to make it a nine-hole golf course. And for those of us who pushed back and said, no, it has to stay an 18-hole golf course, you know, listening to the comments, I wonder if you, I couldn't help but wonder if you had an I told you so moment with respect to the number of units and the size that you initially had proposed. I do have a few questions for the administration, and I don't know in this space exactly who to direct them to. So anyone in the administration can feel free to answer. I was thinking when you were talking about the area in need of rehabilitation, I've read the statute prior and understand why municipalities and townships utilize that. Hi, Mr. Gross, good to see you. But my first thought was listening to, you mentioned that the 6 acres or so at $2.5 million or approximately thereof. I have notes everywhere, so I can't find that right now. The fact that the developer would be absorbing the cost of building the road, the pad for a new clubhouse, I couldn't help to wonder what is the benefit for the developer, any developer, when an area is declared an area in need of rehabilitation. What benefits them? To me, and as a layman, to me, 6 acres for $2.5 million on an amazing piece of property seems, it doesn't even seem realistic to me. So I'd like to understand what is the benefit to the developer when there is an area in need of rehabilitation?
Oh, in this case, you know, it's simple to say the acquisition costs are 2 to 2.5, but it's really not. We're tacking on several $1 million in required costs that they might not otherwise. So, you know, it's such a cliche, but money's fungible. We can either say, okay, we'll pay for the road, hypothetically, we'll pay for all these other things, then we'll expect $5.5 million for 6 acres. And that's probably consistent with what the property could be worth. We're saying that they got to pay for all these other things. So that drives the cost down. So, you know, it's always going to be a matter of where you put the priorities and what you're willing to spend and what you're not willing to spend. So by saying it's only 2.5, it's a little deceiving. But in this case, the area need rehabilitation statute allows for a phase in of taxes. So if we were to sell the property, someone's got to pay taxes right away on that property. In this case, there are no taxes because we own it. So by a phase-in, a 5-year phase-in of full taxation, that provides a little cushion for the developer for carry costs during construction and to put all this money out. So it simply incentivizes anybody to invest in a property and have a 5-year phase-in of full taxation to absorb all these costs that in this case we're asking them to absorb. And look, I know a couple people criticize the deck. No one wants a deck. You know, we envisioned a nice little kind of small community along Northfield Avenue, but again, it's when you push in one direction, something's got to give. And by keeping it 18 holes, it kind of forces us to rethink it, and that requires a deck. In this case, just like the Main Street redevelopment, where the units would surround the deck, so you would never see it. But that's a cost. That's a cost of construction, and unfortunately, decks are a significant cost. If you take the deck out, I didn't do the math, but you're taking out several $1 million off the top that has to be spent. So again, the area needed rehabilitation with a phase in of taxes allows for the developer to have to absorb these costs in this particular case to meet all the expectations that we would want anyone to meet. And again, we believe after working with a bunch of developers and talking with Avalon Bay, yeah, we think they're a good fit. But again, we're not asking the council to approve them. As I mentioned in the slideshow, the next step would be to start talking more detailed about these issues. So, you know, we're not dumping anything on the council and asking you to make decisions quickly. We're just, this is the result of a lot of time and a lot of discussion, weighing all the facts. Kemper's been part of all the discussions. Kyle and David's been part of all these discussions, administration officials. So none of this has taken place in a vacuum. This is what we came up with the hopes of meeting the original expectations.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly understand that. I am a little not a little, I am very concerned about moving the clubhouse. I know that it is dated, incredibly dated. It looks like it's a throwback to the 70s and 80s with the green and the pink, and absolutely stands for, well, it doesn't stand for, it cries for some rehabilitation of itself and remodeling and modernization. The thought of moving it from that space where it is, can you talk about that? I'm not, and just full transparency, not supportive of that at all. You're on mute, Mayor.
This, this wasn't necessarily what was what we all, had an aha moment and said, wow, this is a great idea. We're trying to make it work, trying to figure out how we do this and make it work. So it would not have been the first choice. And if we figure out a way to do this elsewhere, we're all in for that. But, we talked with a lot of people and don't. So I mentioned earlier, and to your point, it's dated. So it's not like it's build a new one or nothing. It's we either build a new one or we have to, as a community, decide to invest in the one we have. And that's fine. One of the speakers from the public earlier, and it's a valid point, I get it, that, why would you build a new one when we have one? The truth is, the one that's there, besides being dated, it was not built for public use. There's huge spaces that are locker rooms that are no longer needed. The dining facilities, if members of the public have been there, it's not a big open space. There's a smaller dining area, then there's another little smaller area. So a couple of speakers mentioned the idea of banquets, and we love that idea. Kemper runs the center that we all see on the Parkway in Springfield. It's a beautiful facility that, by the way, they spent like $20 million building. So we understand the benefits of banquet dollars. We get that. This facility cannot accommodate banquet dollars. So if we decide that the location is the most important, and we're all in for that discussion, then we have to, as a community, decide that, okay, we're not going to build a new one, but we're going to have to spend a lot of money on the existing one, because the banquet dollars that a few speakers spoke about capturing, we cannot capture it with this clubhouse. It was not built for that. It was built for a private club that's got huge spaces wasted for locker rooms and has dining halls that can accommodate, a few people, because that's all a private club would have generated at any given time. So we can have those discussions, and if that's where we determine that we want to go, that's great. But that's why, when trying to figure out all these pieces, we said, look, the only way to make development possible and keep 18 holes is up there. So let's move the clubhouse, and let's at the same time build a clubhouse that can accommodate what we all see as the long-term goals, and that's public dining and banquet opportunities.
Thank you for that, Mayor. And I certainly appreciate the presentation. I know that a lot of conversations went into preparing the concept plan of this. I want to ask now, pivot to when we were doing the site analysis, was there a request or a consideration for what that site analysis would look like if we are incorporating the open space that we all, and I also, along with the public, as you know, was reluctant initially, and certainly was swayed by the walkways, the biking paths, and things of that nature. I understand that was when we were talking about cutting it, when you were talking about cutting it to a 9-hole golf course, which and I realize I can't have it both ways, because I did not support the concept of a 9-hole golf course. Hearing from so many residents that just was like playing miniature golf, and they were not supportive of that. But is there a way, what discussion, if any, has been had when we did a site analysis to include walkways, something for public use?
So we didn't talk about it tonight, but we do. Again, this is a small property for an 18-hole golf course, so there's not a ton of land. What we did not talk about tonight, and we still see, and I feel bad, Leslie and John Cantor weren't happy with it, but because this is what we are talking about is in their neighborhood. We do believe the section across from Walker Road, where holes 4 and 5 are, that's an area that has additional land that the club and now the town owns. We do think, though we cannot keep it 18 holes and accommodate the public spaces that we envisioned 2 years ago, but we do think that section of the property has the ability to come up with some public spaces there. We haven't figured that out yet, but because those two holes are on more land, more acreage than the rest of the courses per hole, we think there's an opportunity to do, whether it's walking paths or some sort of public spaces there. We just haven't gotten that far ahead yet, but we think that property can accommodate it. The challenge then becomes parking, because if you have to create parking there for the people who want to walk there and use the public spaces, so that might always mean parking across the street. But we do things, but the 16 holes on the other side of Walker, there's just not a lot of land left to keep it 18 holes and have the public spaces that we wanted. And again, the whole idea in implementing any development, just like we originally talked about on Northfield, and now we talk about on the top of the hill, it was as we promised. It was to keep it away from the existing residential neighborhood. So we didn't want to build at holes 4 and 5 because there's neighborhoods that we heard of a lot, from a lot of those residents tonight, or 2, we didn't want to build too close to Rainer and West Road and that neighborhood. And again, we were trying to, how do you close that neighborhood off? So, we were trying to, a couple of people talked about the complexity of it. And the problem is, and they're right, which is why it's 2 years later that we're still talking about it, is because we're trying to accomplish a lot of objectives. To be candid, if we decide as a community that we don't want to move the clubhouse and we don't want to build a road, then we have to understand that closing off Rock Spring Road, that's not an objective. So if we as a community to say that these couple other priorities are going to be more important than that, then we're going to have to decide as a community what we sacrifice. And if we decide as a community, both council and the public, that we're not going to do anything, we're just going to tighten up the golf operation, then we need to understand that we're not closing off Rock Spring. Access is going to be through Rock Spring Road. So that's the challenge we're going to have to begin. We're going to make a decision. It's going to impact other things. And that's why it is a complicated scenario, because we try to still accomplish all those objectives at the same time. And I think the complexity of it shows you the complexity of these issues that we were, again, trying to check off all the boxes of the original commitments we made. And if we decide as a community that we don't want to do this, or this, we have to understand that this, or this is probably going to have to be sacrificed. And that could be okay, but we just have to understand that going in.
And I do want to leave some time for my council colleagues to ask questions. I don't want to ask all the questions, but my last question is with respect to the sustainability of Rock Spring as a golf course. I understand that Green Acres is, you mentioned 2 years away from the application time. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the bigger challenge, besides the funding cycle, the bigger challenge is we have to decide what part of land we're saving. And again, we could decide 5 months from now that we don't want to build anything. We're going to preserve all 138 acres. Then we can submit the application. If we decide we want to carve off a piece for eventual development, we have to make sure that the rest of the property meets the obligation and the standards of Green Acres, meaning we can't have uses on that property that aren't consistent with what Green Acres requires. So we would have liked to have submitted an application right away, but once we realized we were going to change directions, we have to make sure we as a community know what we want to preserve forever and what might want to be set aside. And as soon as we do that, we'll submit the application. And again, if we decide 6 months from now that we want to preserve all 138 acres of it, then that's what we'll do. But we just have to know going in that will then tie our hands forever. And if we go through this process and that's what we come up with, then that's fine too. But so we're not abandoning that. It was never realistic to think we were going to submit an application right away until we decided as a community what might be set aside for development and what ultimately wanted to be saved.
So the reason behind that question was more towards my thinking of if we have, or since we have 2 years through for another funding cycle, and this is just personally speaking, we haven't discussed this as a council, but I would be more inclined to considering what Kemper has done, and kudos to Kemper for all of the successes that they have brought to Rock Spring. What 2 years from now looks like, whether it's sustainable, with the number of rounds, I understand that that is because of COVID, but you know, COVID has changed a lot of things. This pandemic, people aren't going back to work right away. Some people aren't having to go back into the office, you know, but maybe a couple of times a week. And so we don't know what that trend is going to be. So I personally am inclined, and that's why I asked when the funding cycle was, the next funding cycle was, to let's see what happens in the next year or so and see if there is a trend or a change in that trend. And if that trend is as it is now, you know, I would be inclined to hold off on the Green Acres application. And this is coming from a council member who has been pushing you to apply because I want to reduce the debt service. But listening to your presentation today, Mayor, and the concept of that plan, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. Obviously, we've got a lot of unpacking to do with it, but I just wanted my council colleagues to know where I am and what space I'm in. I'd like to open it up to my council colleagues who have questions. And for the public, Councilwoman Castellino is on, but her camera is not working, unfortunately. So Councilwoman Castellino, do you see the little raise your hand function if you, well, you're next to speak anyway, if you'd like to speak. So the floor
Yes, can you hear me, Council President?
Yes, I can. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I apologize to the administration, the public, for not having my camera on this evening. New computer, and I eventually will figure it out for you. So thank you to the administration, the mayor. You know, we haven't rushed this. Maybe this seems rushed tonight because it's the first we're all hearing of it. And from what I hear, there's going to be conversation. And I appreciate us not having to be having anything on our agenda in the near future. But let's start off with why we bought the golf course. The major reason for purchasing the course is we were in danger of 1,000 to 1,500 units. We were going through the litigation with West Essex Highlands. We saw where that landed. And so from the beginning, that was the priority for us. And the golf course was really a bonus. And I really have to thank Chris Parker and the team. Kemper, what a phenomenal job you have been doing. Just amazing. My husband is an avid golfer, so I am in tune to all the lingo and appreciate all the numbers and the conversations that Chris and myself have had through the past few years, and kudos to you. I know one of my disappointments was we weren't able to really get the restaurant up and going, especially with COVID hitting. And so I know Council President, you had just mentioned of not sure how long we could hold off for. That, Mayor, I would have to ask you in regards to if we do hold off, I would assume in order to make the continue progress at the restaurant, we would need to have some upgrades there. So again, I don't know how long that time frame could be, because I would imagine we would need to update and upgrade the facilities if we're going to accommodate the public there. I appreciate Rock Spring neighborhood and the surrounding neighborhoods were coming out. They've been great advocates. I know it's been sometimes stressful with traffic in the neighborhood. And that's one of the reasons why the plan was to build a new roadway, which, as the mayor stated, has forced some complications and made the transaction more complex. But I have a few questions in regards to, or maybe just even questions and to update the public. Has there been any interest for a hotel? I know with COVID, I know there was interest in the beginning for other restaurateurs to come in for wedding venue. It's a beautiful spot for a wedding venue. Mayor, can you update on us on interest with those two type of businesses?
So like I mentioned, we expect to have a restaurant operator in there this year. Obviously, anything we can work out with Kemper, and an operator is going to be on a short-term basis because we just don't know what the future holds. We explored, and this is prior to COVID, we explored hotels and hotel operators and weren't getting a ton of interest. Unfortunately, that was pre-COVID. Now post-COVID, I suspect that that market, like any other, will change a little bit. And as the council president mentioned, we might have to wait a year or two to see what the world looks like. We love the concept. It's a question of whether or not someone can make the dollars work. And as I mentioned, now in post-COVID, when some of the beautiful wedding facilities and banquet facilities we have here are really on the brink of closure, it's hard to think that someone's going to spend a lot of money until the market adjusts itself. Like a lot of times in our lives, things happen. We have to give it time for the market to adjust ourselves. So we love the concept. We all know it's great to have these wonderful concepts and they sound great, but unless someone's going to write the check to bring it to life. So yeah, setting a hotel and a banquet facility there is a great idea, but unless someone's going to write the check because they think they can make money, it's hard for us to force that. And a couple of people speaking mentioned Essex Green. That's a perfect example. Essex Green has approvals from our planning board for all kinds of wonderful things, many of the things the public mentioned, but they're not willing to write the check to do them. So it's hard. What more can the town do? And that's the case. So there might be an adjustment period. Maybe this is something where the town has to go on pause and see what the post-COVID economic world is going to be like, to see where there might be an opportunity.
And in regards to the 300 units proposed, any age restrictions? Will they be 55 and older?
That was not talked about. Again, some of this stuff was general. This is not a done plan. There's still a ton of things that would have had to be addressed and would be discussed over these next couple of months. So I can tell you a lot of the developers don't want to build the 55 and older anymore, because if they don't get the interest, they get stuck with empty units, and ultimately then they file tax appeals, so it's that vicious circle. But that's not to say we can't require it. The problem is if we require it, then chances are maybe people go away. When we first kicked around the idea with the area fronting Northfield, again, we were thinking a much lower percentage of units that would have had the affordable housing component, which couldn't have been age restricted. So that really would have brought it down to maybe 130 units, maybe a little bit more manageable. I'm not well versed enough in the demographics of the development world to know what they could fill, but I suspect if we're into the 200 plus units, it's going to be difficult to get someone to underwrite a strictly age restricted project.
And then my question also is, I could see, we want to have the golf check down the road, so, brings less traffic from up the road. But was there any talk or discussion of leaving the restaurant, even not the existing building, because that would be challenging to build with residential, but leaving some kind of restaurant component with the view there?
So again, it's been kicked around, and we never got to the real kind of nitty gritty architectural kind of design. But so could something be like that accommodated? Sure, absolutely. We didn't get to that point. This was a long time just coming up with a concept that dollars made sense. So, but certainly can be contemplated. And just for clarification, I know one or two of the speakers mentioned a high rise. This is not envisioned to be a high rise. This is 4 stories. Maybe 5, because if they exceed that, they have to shift to steel construction, and no one wants to shift from frame construction to steel construction. So this is not conceived as a high rise. This was maybe 4 or 5 stories, but could somewhere in there, even on the upper floor, be a public restaurant? Sure. We never got to that point. We wanted to get feedback from the council and the public before we really started talking details. We're just not there yet, but certainly, those things would all be up for discussion when we figure out where it is we want to go.
Councilwoman Castellino, you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. No, thanks, Mayor. I know this has been time consuming, very challenging. I wouldn't be able to move forward without seeing some kind of, plan, this mapped out, seeing a restaurant component up top, listening to and talking to many residents through the past few years. At the very least, if there isn't any kind of recreation facility for all the residents, there was plenty of interest in them coming to a spot to dine and, go out on an outdoor patio, overlook the view with a cocktail or, some kind of venue that they could go visit their open space. So also, I appreciate you, and I know it's challenging with the walkways for the new road. I'm not sure, I'm sorry, over across on holes 4 and 5, but is there's any way putting sidewalks and walking paths from at least from up to Rock Spring down the new roadway. I'd be interested in seeing, that as well. But thank you, and I look forward to continual discussions. I will say if we don't move forward with anything in the near future, and I know the course will continue great success. And thank you, Mr. France, also for your talents as well with the reconfiguration of the course and keeping the integrity of the course in mind. It's really important. But if we aren't going to move forward too quickly, or there isn't going to be some kind of change, if Mr. Lepore could keep in contact with the residents over at Rock Spring Road to continue the dialogue there. And I know the chief has always, been keeping great contact to make sure we keep that roadway safe for our residents during a busy golf season. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman, along those lines, just in case you don't know, Rock Spring, Rainer, and West are all getting repaved with new curbing beginning next week. So we've been talking with the residents. Took a little while to figure out a plan that satisfied most of the residents. You never satisfy everyone, obviously, but we couldn't shut down golf. But there's only one way in and out. So with Lenny and Kemper's help, we figured out a plan that's going to keep the neighborhood moving during the 5 weeks of construction there. But yeah, that whole neighborhood's getting new curbing and new roadways.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate Mr. Lepore's efforts as well. Thank you, Council President. I'm good.
You're welcome.
This evening.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I just want to, I see that there is a member of the public who has raised their hand. Public comment period is now over. Please feel free to email the council as we are no longer taking questions from the public at this time. Councilwoman McCartney.
Thank you, Council President.
Welcome.
Mayor, thank you. I was so anxiously waiting for this presentation. Thank you, Kemper, for your patience with us. I'm pleased to hear that we're going to try to keep it an 18-hole golf course. I think that would be important. I am going back to the beginning of your presentation when you were talking about a townwide area native rehabilitation. That is a lot to absorb. I just want a clarification on that. When you mentioned that, I am hearing this for the first time and seeing your slides for the first time also, so I do have notes, lots of notes. And we are trying to do more with less land because we were initially talking about 10 or 15 acres, not 6.5. When you were talking about an area native rehabilitation and that homeowners and commercial properties would be exempt for 5 years, I just wanted to clarify that does mean exempt. It does not mean deferred, and that something happens in 5 years or the tax assessment is exempt for 5 years.
Yeah, it's only the added assessment. It's not the base taxes. It encourages someone to invest in their property rather than being discouraged of what's going to happen to the property taxes. And I got to be honest with you, Councilwoman, obviously you've been so interested in planning issues forever. This is something that the council, the administration believes we should discuss as a township, regardless of what happens with Rock Spring. We think this is an interesting tool that other towns, some neighboring towns, are using to encourage investment from their existing property owners. And we think this is something we should explore. So
And-
that aside, this is something that the administration wants the council, and with input from our planning board, to look more at. We've gotten a lot of input from Paul Gragel on this. So this is something that we think has a benefit aside from Rock Spring. It encourages people who live in town to invest in their property without getting immediately saddled with the increased taxes.
Yes, thank you. I definitely agree. And I can see that happening. And when you talked about, you had one of your slides was a checklist, we definitely would fit the criteria for this, because I know Historic Preservation Commission, we already have studies on St. Cloud area, Lower Gregory, Upper Gregory. I'm not even sure what else, but I know that many studies have been done on designating these areas as historic. So we would fit that criteria. One of the notes I have when we were talking about access on Northfield, I just wanted, again, clarification that if that is a road going out to Northfield, that does not become a cut through to come up Northfield and out Rock Spring, or it would strictly stay on Northfield?
It would not connect to Rock Spring again, because theoretically in this concept, Rock Spring would be gated off. It would not be closed off. It would not be, a wall would be built or nothing would be separating it. It would always be there for emergency. But no, it would not be a cut through. There was, again, this is just very general conversation. There was some value in contemplating that residents from Rock Spring, West, and Rainier would be able to exit down the road, because as we all know, coming out of Rock Spring on Northfield is a little bit hairy. There's no lights there. It's the lights up the street, traffic's coming up.
Right on the bend.
So it's not always the safest thing to come out of Rock Spring Road and make a left on Northfield. So we did kick around the idea, and even if we don't develop it, but eventually decide to build the road anyway, that there's an advantage that people could exit that neighborhood, but not come in from that way. So just a one-way coming out of the road. So they wouldn't have to make the left at the end of Rock Spring. They could at least go down this new road and then make a left at a traffic light. So again, this was just all very general conversation, but no, it would not be a cut through designed as a cut through. It would most likely either be completely gated off or just set up so people from that neighborhood can come out. If they wanted to go in the neighborhood, they would have to go back up to Rock Spring. So just
Yes, thank you.
just general conversations.
That was more a planning question. I guess another planning question would be, with that same road, is there room there for any type of buffer since it's parallel to west?
Yeah, so a few residents, and I kind of mentioned earlier, I should have emphasized more that that's not an architectural,
Drawing.
specific plan. Kyle put the road in there, but it wasn't exactly where it was going to go. So it was pretty close to the residents on West Road for this presentation's sake. But no, we would not expect it to be right on top of West Road. We'd have to figure that out. This was just set up again for conversation's sake. We're not.
Thank you.
We're not looking to have a roadway through people's backyards either. So.
Good. In my 5 pages of notes here, I didn't count how many times I wrote, what about the view, the view, the view. I'm glad what is happening this evening sounds more like a work in progress, and that I realize that we are trying to do more with less land. I get that, but I do want to focus on having the best of both worlds for the golfers and the revenue that is generating. And I thank Kemper and Chris for their team for doing that, but also for the residents as well. And I think what I would like to, if we could concentrate, is again, going back to the historic, though it's not designated, to actually renovate, looking at renovating the clubhouse as a restaurant, create space, event space there, and use that space so that we can focus, again, having the best of both worlds for the residents and for the golfers, and concentrate on that space for development, if at all possible.
And look, we could decide that despite our original intentions and despite the need to replace revenue, maybe we decide that that's not what we want to do. And we could decide to just spend several $1,000,000 to implement some of Kyle's changes, add the road, fix up the clubhouse, and not have any development. That's a decision we all make as a community and a council collectively every year. These are budgetary issues. So if we decide that we do want to check off some of the boxes, just not all of them, and invest several $1,000,000, that's fine too. Or maybe to the council president's point that we have to see if we're comfortable that the course is going to be sustainable.
No, what I was thinking of almost like, the first level would be the clubhouse and then just build upon that if we could develop units there.
The problem is the existing structures probably can't accommodate much. It's almost, and we could decide that we all want it up there. It probably would have to be new. The way the clubhouse was built, again, it was built as a private clubhouse. So you almost have to completely level it anyway to meet that. So, or we can do a major renovation and just accommodate it as a clubhouse and a restaurant. I don't know that units can be there and with the building at the same time. So those are things that if we figure out conception as a community, as a collective governing body, that we can look into more details. We didn't dig too much into the details because we didn't want to dig into the details without the council understanding the concept first and ultimately all agreeing on a concept. But if we agree that that's the direction we want to go, we'll look more into those details, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman McCartney. Councilman Rutherford.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Mayor, and the Kemper team and all those that are involved in this presentation tonight. I thought it was an excellent presentation. Do have a couple of questions. Some have been addressed, at least in some level so far. The first question was with regard to this area in need of rehabilitation designation. I wanted to know what is the downside to that? I understand the upside, and it just seems like a no-brainer to me. So maybe I'm missing something, but what is the downside?
So, Councilman, admittedly, I had never really heard about it until we started going through this process. And again, Paul Greigel had weighed in a little bit, and a few other people, some members of the planning board had kind of done this in other towns. And that was my first thought too. Like, I don't really see the downside. So though we waited to present it as part of tonight's presentation, as I mentioned to the Councilwoman McCartney, we're planning to come back with the council president's permission to have a more detailed discussion about the area need rehabilitation, because I agree with you. I don't see a downside to the community, to the residents. I don't see a downside. I think this is an interesting tool that the state has come up with, and I think it's one we should take advantage of.
Thank you. Wanted to see, perhaps this is best answered by one of either Mr. Parker or one of those that are associated with Kemper. Some of the questions tonight, and my own question with regard to post-COVID performance of the property. As we scale back up, as we come out of this pandemic and things return to some level of normalcy, do you have any projections on number of rounds played, restarting food service, on the ability to perhaps keep some of the contactless services that you've implemented, due to COVID, which obviously would require fewer employees? Can you speak to that? What that kind of ramp up would look like, over the course of time, and how that would play out with regard to the performance?
Yeah, so golf as a whole is going to continue to be pretty strong this year. We're seeing that across the country. So, we're anticipating to see pretty much the same amount of rounds that we had last year. There'll be some drop off when people start going back to work, which is natural, but we don't see that there's going to be a strong drop off there. Now, as far as opening up other areas of the operation, we are, like the mayor said, we're talking with a group and hoping to come to an arrangement where we can have some type of dining experience at the club outside of what we offered last year, which was very limited. We do feel like that will help to add to it and, help increase the experience as well as add something for the residents and for those of the town.
And you expect that ramp up to be profitable, correct? Or
It
that
would-
introduction, actually?
Yeah, we would hope that it would bring a different clientele or different segment to the facility, not just the golfers and those that are, just golf oriented. So yes, we would hope that it would be more profitable.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I just jump in there too? I think Chris is being awfully modest. One of the things that didn't get mentioned in the proposal is why some of those expenses were down this year. And during the period in time which the club was closed, Chris was out there on a mower, Brandon, and just one other guy. So the three of them worked their tails off to kind of keep the golf course from being overgrown. So that's one area we expect the expense to go back up because we'll have a normal maintenance crew for next year. But, to be honest, Chris, and you can maybe nod your head or agree or disagree, but the golf course is actually so popular that we almost have too many rounds, if that can be a thing. We're actually, Chris and I have had a lot of conversations about the ways to manage that traffic. The golf, you heard a little about the car paths. The tee boxes are quite small because they were designed for a private facility that might do 15,000 rounds, not a public facility that's doing 35, 36. So I think the long-term forecast is really great. And frankly, a slight reduction in play probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too. As it's gotten busier, you're normally going to spend more money to improve the product and try to keep it up. It's really a lot of wear and tear out there. And, things like the bunkers that, quite frankly, were in need of repair from day one, and we've sort of kicked the can down the road. And, we want to address that certainly long-term from a capital standpoint, but in order to keep the bunkers in decent shape, we have to spend more money on an ongoing basis. And so, as play has increased, expenses will go up because of our goal to continually improve the product.
Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, and I'm happy to hear any other thoughts on that. I see some other heads nodding. Okay. I didn't see in the plan, Mayor, what, if anything, is going to be done with the existing pool? Is that if we were to go ahead with development, would we remove that, or is there a plan for that, or has that been considered?
No, so the administration, although it comes up frequently, we have been consistent that we do not support a second town pool. So if we were to develop that portion of the property, we would pave over the pool. Yeah.
Got it. I have a question regarding this proposed road. I know President Biden has introduced an infrastructure bill. I know it's nowhere near finished, but a big chunk of that, at least as currently proposed, over 600 billion, is for roads. Would new roads, is that something we could go off after to lessen the burden?
So obviously, if it does, we will. We do get, and you'll hear more about it in the budget presentation. We get state money every year for roads. So we get paving road money. This past year, we did the Dogwood neighborhood with state money. We also get federal money, usually through community development block grant. So if there's federal money, we'll do whatever we can to tap into it. But as you mentioned, it's still nothing official yet. So we don't know what the parameters of that would be. But certainly if there was federal money, we're gonna do everything we can to get our share of it.
Got it. Thank you. I think the last question I have, and I did a quick Google search on Avalon Bay. I don't know how far along in that process we've gone. I know they've had some issues with fires in other projects. But the question I really have is the 15% affordable component. And everyone knows I'm not really supportive of residential development in town. I think we've got enough housing. But if we were to do housing there, I'd hope that there's at least some room to negotiate how much of it is reserved for affordable units and not just the 15% minimum.
So, Councilman, a good point. When we've had these discussions before, that's always negotiable, but it's a cost issue. So I mentioned earlier and briefly during the presentation that the Central Avenue redevelopment project's going great. Those units are renting up quickly. They're beautiful. And it's largely an affordable project, and the town had to subsidize the construction of that because it's just not always. It doesn't make economic sense on a ledger sheet to fit in the affordable. So very often communities like ours have to subsidize that with our COA money. And we did that because that was an important project. So that's always going to be negotiable. And if we as a community believe, again, that I talked earlier about competing interests, if we think that's an important interest, then we also have to be willing to subsidize that. And that's something we might as a community decide to do. But it's also possible right now, our fair share housing obligation is 15. There's a good chance that that's going to change in the near future. So where it might increase to 20% even without negotiating it. But that's always something we can do. We have that ability. We just can't negotiate it down, but we can always negotiate it up.
Got it. That concludes my questions. And again, I want to thank you guys for such a thorough presentation.
Thank you, Councilman Rutherford. Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Kemper Sports. Thank you to all those involved for your preliminary presentation here this evening. Just a few concerns that I have, and again, I always reiterate when you go last, a lot of the questions and concerns that you have already been asked and answered by my council colleagues. One thing I would like to reiterate is just the location of the clubhouse. I have personally had an event at the clubhouse. I know how impressive that view is, and if there is any possibility that we could do something to just generate some type of continued preservation of that location for the general public, that would certainly be something that I would be interested in us seeing. So whether it be a rooftop restaurant like we have rooftop over at Edison Battery Factory, something, I would certainly encourage that. That view is absolutely priceless. So I would like to reiterate that comment. In addition to that, I did have some questions about some of the other facilities, the pool, we've answered that, the tennis courts. We haven't necessarily addressed that and how it would be utilized, but that would be also something that could certainly accommodate for open public space and usage by the community. Another concern that I do have is, again, accessibility from Northfield Avenue and making sure, and I again, realizing that this is all preliminary, but we do want to respect those neighbors and not impede on their land, not put a road right in their backyard. I'm clear that this is all preliminary. We have a long way to go, but those are just some of the concerns that I have. Wanted to also just address some of the comments about housing in West Orange and the price of housing in West Orange. Professionally, right now, you know, not just in West Orange, but in all communities, we have the lowest inventory stock of housing in the last few years. Houses are selling way over asking price. Multiple offers are common. So for anyone who is concerned about not being able to sell their house, I would certainly encourage them to find a realtor who knows exactly what they're doing, because that's just not the issue. Being able to sell a house in our community or any of our surrounding communities is not hard to do right now at all. So that's just one of the comments that I wanted to make based on some of the feedback that was addressed this evening. Also, the rehabilitation designation for the community. That is something that I am familiar with in other communities. And to that point, it does, again, encourage, especially now at a time where we're in COVID and so many people are understanding and realizing that they do need to do some improvements to their own properties. That would be such a benefit to the West Orange community in whole, just to be able to defer that increased taxation if you have the capacity to do improvements. So I definitely support us looking at that and the opportunity that could certainly provide. That's all I have, Council President. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Again, thank you everyone for the presentation here this evening.
Thank you, Councilwoman Williams. I've had listening to my council colleagues' conversations and then going back through my very messy notes and highlighting the items that I wanted to ask before. I'll start with something that probably makes Mr. Gross cringe when I email him. His response to my last request on this was the administration is keenly aware of your position on RFPs and RFQs. I have to tell you, Mr. Gross, I didn't share with you, but I had a really good laugh at that. So I certainly appreciate your candor. So some of the residents did mention, I believe some residents who are in development mentioned RFPs, RFQs with respect to, I think it was Mark Rosenberg, certainly appreciated that insight. I want to say Fred Arnstein, if I'm saying that correctly, you know, I preface this question with that statement because I am interested in understanding better how we benefit as a township if we are to put this out for what's a better use proposal from competing interests, right? Because I think that, we all know that it is a gem. What we own is very unique. It's an incredible opportunity that the township has. And I'm saying this, if we are to move forward in any direction, I agree that we should look for those. And I know, Mayor, you have had conversations as the mayor, and I'm going to put that in a parking lot for a second just to speak to the residents and those who are listening. It is the mayor's job, right, to have these conversations with developers. The developers aren't calling the business administrator or the council members directly. They know that the person they need to speak to is the mayor, because that's who we've all elected to lead us in governance, in development. So, Mayor, can you talk about what your position is on going out for RFQs and RFPs in this particular, should we move forward in this particular regard? What is your position on that?
So the administration has no objection to doing RFP. I just wanted to kind of emphasize the role that Avalon Bay has played to getting to this point, and that we feel they have the financial means of getting a project done. But we have no objection to doing that. It wouldn't really be until we figure out a plan, and truth is, you know, that plan might change everyone's interest, but we have no objection. We've spent a lot of time with Avalon Bay because when they reached out and more discussions took place, and we felt that they were a good partner. But in the end, like I mentioned earlier, we're not asking the council to put anything to a vote. This was just something that we felt that they've been a good partner up to this point, and they are a real significant entity, and if we wanted to proceed, we think they'd be a good partner. But no, we have no objection to submitting an RFP. We've heard from a lot of developers in the last 2 years. Some were more serious than others, but no, absolutely not. Once we figure out a plan, if it includes a development piece, then we have no objection to seeing what the world would offer. Our only hesitancy in that is that some of our past experiences, Councilwoman McCartney, we went through that process, you would remember, with Main Street redevelopment, and it turned out to be futile because, as of, I guess, a couple speakers mentioned they were going to promise you the moon, and when it came down to actually getting things in paper, they all bailed. So the administration at that time wasted probably 8 or 9 months in a process that turned out to be all show and no substance. So but if that's something we believe is important, we're fine with that. We have, we're fine with that. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Mayor. Also wanted to ask about, I know you mentioned in the presentation, the discussions about, approaching the council when the numbers made sense. What preliminarily would those numbers making sense look like to our budget? How would it positively impact our budget?
So as I mentioned, we have a real principal and interest payment that the township has to deal with. When we did the original financial structure in 2019, it was structured in a way that the township had no cost in 2019. We emphasized that. I think one of the speakers even mentioned that, and that was the case. I never said that we had no cost ever. It was just structured that we had no cost in 19. We knew that we would have a cost in 20 and 21 and 22, and we had to pay down the note. So John Gross has structured some of that financing with short-term notes that had, favorable terms, and we're always looking at ways to make favorable terms, but we have an obligation. And again, if we feel as a community that preserving the land and coming up with some public spaces is more important, then we have to understand that, we're not going to be able to retire that note as quickly as we'd hoped. Part of the original structure in 2019 involved selling a piece of the land and Green Acres funding to pay off the bond. In fact, the original presentation, if you pull it up, it said that we had anticipated paying off the note in 8 years. And that would still be our goal. But if we decide that selling off a piece of the land is not what we want as a community, then that's fine. We just have to understand that we can apply for Green Acres funding. We simply won't be able to retire the bond. We'll only probably be able to retire half of it. And again, those are all the decisions we make when we prioritize these things. Some of the members of this public had great ideas. They just come at a cost. So that's something that we're all going to evaluate as a governing body. Maybe that's okay with us, and that's part of the deliberative process. But we always felt that we should recapture some of the revenue that's lost. And that's what we tried to do with coming up with this initial concept. If we decide collectively as a governing body that that's less important, let's just get the Green Acres application together, then that we just have to understand that means we're not going to retire the note in the 8 years that we had hoped for, and that we're going to have to continue to have an obligation moving forward.
Completely agree with you in that regard, Mayor. You know that my reluctance and what got me over to a yes vote was understanding the fiduciary responsibility that we as elected officials have to our residents to ensure that we do focus on raising that revenue. So recuperating that revenue with that purchase was certainly something that was a focus for me. I'm just more inclined to wait at this point and have further discussion. The other question I had was with respect to the area needed redevelopment. Does that impact our state aid at all?
It's sorry, Council President, I don't want to correct you, but it's area needed rehabilitation, not redevelopment.
What did I say? Did I say redevelopment? I'm sorry, I meant rehabilitation, and I was thinking about it and still said it wrong. Area in need of rehabilitation.
We'll check with some of the people who've done this in neighboring towns and have done it legally. I have not heard that at all in all the research and discussions we've had, but certainly we should we could check on that. But when you look at the number of towns over these last year or so that are starting to implement this, I can't imagine it does, because I think the list was 15, 20 towns that have already done it. So I got to assume that they wouldn't have done it if they felt it impacted state aid. But certainly something we would look into more details as we continue that conversation. And again, with your permission, Council President, I would like to have a more in-depth conversation about that with the council in the coming weeks. We think that's something that we should move forward with regardless of what we do at Rock Spring.
Certainly would like to have that discussion. I'm going to give the floor to Councilman Rutherford. I see his hand up.
I just wanted to thank you, Council President. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I know we're not addressing public comments, but I do think it's important for the folks that are paying attention tonight and are present in this meeting to know that there is work being done in other parts of town. So there was some concern about Edison Lofts and Main Street. There's a tremendous amount of work being done down there. We are certainly not just focused on one issue at a time. And I do think as we work through all of these issues, they will see some progress and some things that they can really be excited about. Thank you.
Thank you for stating so, Councilman Rutherford.
President, could I just comment on that? I know, because I hate to hear when people in the public say what a failure Main Street redevelopment is. You can't see it from the outside. It's more than 80% occupied. The units are absolutely gorgeous. So sure, the retail's vacant, but as Councilman Rutherford talked about, we're all working on a bunch of other things there. But I hate for the public to feel it's a failure. It's really not. They're over 80% occupied, and they're really beautiful. and getting top dollars. The larger units there are going for 4,000 a month. And I hate for people to say that that's a failure, because more than $4,000 a month for a rental unit, that's a serious renter. And that's a project we should be proud of as a community, not always looking at as a failure, because it's anything but that.
I have to echo those sentiments, Mayor. You know that I was there this weekend, and I was thoroughly impressed with the amenities, the facilities, the rental units are incredible. And to Councilman Rutherford's point, we are working to try and make things happen, but there are a lot of moving pieces to all of these different projects. And I know that the mayor has been willing to participate in those conversations, and so certainly grateful for those opportunities to have those discussions. Looking at the time, I know that we have members here who I want to say, oh, Councilwoman McCartney, I saw your hands.
Well, just to pick up on Councilman Rutherford's comments to the public, also, there was a comment made about commuters. And I also wanted to make a comment that we have jitneys in every corner of town to get our residents to the city or to wherever they're going, and even for our senior citizens to get to where they need to go. And as we just heard at our last week's council meeting, the redeveloper on our Central Avenue space, we have been in talks with New Jersey Transit, and now I feel closer and closer with the additional, it's on the planning board meeting tomorrow night.
Nope, I froze.
With additional work being done on Central Avenue. So I think we have addressed that for our commuters. Thank you.
Okay, do any of my council colleagues have any other questions? Any discussion you want to have as a council? What do we want to let the administration know where we are? I'm feeling a sort of consensus, but I don't want to speak for you all in asking the administration to press pause or have a different discussion, a different plan, a different proposal. Can I ask you all to chime in?
Well, I would like to chime in, and just if we are going to look at RFPs or at this preliminary plan, I do appreciate just having this conversation, but to look at, I'm concentrating on that view. I bought my house because of my view. So I would like to look at something, there's a way to incorporate that view with what we have been discussing this evening for both the golfers and property owners and our residents. Somehow incorporate the best of both worlds, for both worlds.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Rutherford, I saw you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I love that we're keeping it an 18-hole course. I am all for updating the clubhouse. I am just in general against additional residential development. I think the stress on services, it's just, I don't think we get our bang for the buck, especially in that corridor with two other developments right now. So that's my hesitancy. But again, I am super excited to keep it as an 18-hole golf course.
Just a point of clarification, Councilman Rutherford, there's one development presently on Northfield. I know that there's one that may be proposed, because I recall a conversation that the developer said if the community was against it, they wouldn't move forward. So right now one, but a second is proposed, yes. So I certainly appreciate that perspective. Councilwoman Williams, I know that Councilwoman Castellino had to jump off the call, so she had some family engagements with her son being in town. Councilwoman Williams.
I don't have any additional requests. I would just like to see what comes next and be open to just receive more information from the administration, more comments from the public as more information is provided to us. I definitely appreciate all the hard work that has gone into the presentation for this evening. I think it is definitely us moving in the right direction It is not us moving fast forward and not unwilling to hit the pause button. I do recall sitting in all of those meetings at the town council, at the high school, when we first started talking about Rock Spring. And this was always the proposal. We were going to understand within a 2-year period what the golf course was going to bring. And the administration has done exactly what they indicated they would do. We did not know at that beginning preliminary stage whether it would be a 9-hole course or remain an 18-hole course. But I think obviously given what has happened and transpired, whether it be based on the pandemic or just the admiration and golf lovers from that course going from private to public, definitely we need to make some decisions, and we certainly need to recoup any of the tax losses that we have incurred as a community. I think that is a primary concern. We hear from our residents all the time that our taxes are extremely high in West Orange. And unless we're willing to make some type of sacrifices to increase our tax ratables, then we're going to stay stuck in that position. So it is going to be sacrifices on everyone's part, decisions made as a community, and for us to move forward with whatever direction we identify is best for West Orange.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mayor, thank you, and the administration and everyone else who participated in this discussion this evening and the preparation for this evening. Certainly a lot to, like I said earlier, unpack and consider. I think that we can call this work session to an end until the next work session, and always grateful for the opportunity to have work sessions to you and to the administration, Mr. Mayor. And thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Franz, away from you in sunny, hot Carolinas that you are. All right.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
night.
everyone. Great job.
Thank you, everyone. This is to inform you that when I end the meeting, it will end for those both on and off screen, and no other business will be conducted. And hopefully we will see you tomorrow night for the town council meeting. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye. Good night.